Anime autopsy here, and we need to have a conversation about Blackbeard, because I am genuinely convinced the community has completely lost the plot on this man's mystery body. Every day I open Twitter, Reddit, whatever, and I see the same carousel of panels. Jaya rooftop, Marineford with the curtain over Whitebeard, Marco saying, atypical body, slapped together with a caption that boils down to 3 heads, Cerberus fruit, multiple souls, Oda is a genius, nothing has been revealed yet. Listen to me. I need you to sit down. I need you to take a breath, because a huge percentage of those posts are treating confirmed storytelling as if it's still a wild theory. The problem is not that fans are wrong to speculate. This is not a sin. This is normal. The problem is that we've started treating Oda's quiet answers as if they belong in the same category as crack headcanon, just because it's more fun to pretend everything is still a mystery. Here's the thing. Oda already told you what Blackbeard is. Not in an SBS where he draws a goofy diagram of Teach's organs. Not in some spoiler interview, but in the actual manga through foreshadowing that pays off. Jaya, Marineford, Marco's atypical body, the never sleeps line, the 3-skull Jolly Roger, the way his teeth keep changing. These are not isolated hints. They are one planned chain of evidence from an author who knew exactly what he was doing. Yet somehow, the community treats each panel as a separate Rorschach test. You get the Jaya scene where Luffy and Zoro say he, and Nami and Sanji say they, and instead of asking why that pronoun gag exists structurally, we spam it under every 3 souls thread and move on. You get Marineford, where Teach literally throws a curtain over Whitebeard's corpse, comes out with a second devil fruit, Marco spells out his body's different, and people still go, maybe it's just the Yami fruit. Really? A perfect example of how far off the rails we've gone is the teeth discourse. The memes about Blackbeard's missing teeth, then full teeth, then different gaps, are everywhere. Same with the 3-skull flag, the Cerberus edits, the 3-headed final form fan art. But almost nobody is putting that visual weirdness next to the dialogue and the structural parallels that actually explain how he can hold multiple devil fruits. Teeth screenshots get more engagement than the panels that matter, and I say this with love and also with deep personal shame as someone who has spent an embarrassing amount of my adult life rereading every Blackbeard scene, every SBS mention, every interview snippet, trying to prove that Oda already told us the secret. I am a pattern-seeking monkey who sees Jesus in toast. Except in this case, the toast is chapter-structured, editor-verified foreshadowing. So this video is me finally unloading the receipts. By the end, you're not going to be asking, what is Blackbeard? You're going to be asking how we missed something Oda has been quietly screaming since Jaya. The promise. By the end, Blackbeard's secret won't be a theory anymore. So, here's what we're going to do. I need you to actually clock the timestamp right now, because I'm about to spend the next 2+ hours walking you, slowly and methodically, through every meaningful Blackbeard breadcrumb from Jaya to Egghead. This is not a casual, what if Blackbeard is a time-traveling moon goat theory video. This is a structured argument. The thesis is simple, and it is rude. Oda has already revealed how Blackbeard's body works and why he can hold multiple devil fruits, not hinted, revealed. The manga, the SBS, the visual motifs, the weird running gags about teeth and sleep and Seiki cups, they all quietly confirm one specific model that the community keeps dancing around but never committing to, because committing means you have to throw out your pet headcanons. So here's the thing. We need to be adults about foreshadowing. For this video, I'm building a framework with 3 categories. First, real foreshadowing. Intentional setup for a payoff the author already knows. Second, retrofitting, when Oda goes back to an old panel and assigns it new meaning. This is not a sin. This is not bad writing. This is, in fact, how most long-running storytelling survives. And third, the nuclear option I'm calling pre-writing. Pre-writing is when the author has already decided the answer before Chapter 1. Joy Boy, the will of D, Blackbeard's body, all in the notebook before Luffy ever put on the straw hat. Then instead of planting hints, Oda is just revealing pieces of a fixed solution out of order. The Blackbeard gun is not on the mantle because maybe he'll shoot it later. The shooting scene is already written. We're just catching up. So when we go arc by arc, Drum, Jaya, Ace versus Teach, Impel Down, Marineford, Hachinosu, Egghead, we're not doing the usual every panel is evidence if you squint hard enough and turn your monitor upside down routine. We're asking, which moments are genuine, planned foreshadowing of a known Blackbeard secret? Which are retrofits where Oda smartly reuses old material? And which are pre-written time bombs, things he locked in from the start but only half explained? Because if we don't define those categories, everything collapses. If Marco saying Teach's body is atypical is the same level of proof as some random teeth inconsistency, then every Blackbeard panel becomes evidence of whatever theory you woke up wanting to believe. At that point, we're not analysing writing, we're doing astrology with pirates. This is fine if you're just having fun on Twitter. This is a problem if you're claiming Oda foreshadowed this. By the end of this, I want you to be able to explain Blackbeard's secret in one clear paragraph. No 12-step conspiracy board. No, and then maybe Imu did surgery. One paragraph backed by specific scenes. Jaya's they versus he speech, the never sleeps line, the three-skull Jolly Roger, the way his teeth and sake cups keep betraying multiple identities. You should walk away knowing which of those are actual reveals, which are clever retrofits, and which are just the fandom seeing Jesus in toast. And once we have that paragraph, we're going back through the story and watching Oda quietly scream it at us from day one. You're using foreshadowing wrong, the three-category model. So before we start stapling red string to every panel Blackbeard breathes in, we need to fix a vocabulary problem. The community has turned foreshadowing into this catch-all religion where any coincidence, any reused pose, any skull vaguely pointing left means Oda planned the entire universe on a napkin in 1997. It's flattering. It's also useless. You can't analyze craft if every happy accident gets promoted to 5D chess. Here's the thing. When you call everything foreshadowing, you turn Oda into an omniscient god and turn yourself into a pattern-seeking monkey who sees Jesus in toast. A cover page has 3 circles. Foreshadowing. A random side character mentions the moon. Foreshadowing. Someone's teeth look weird because Oda was tired that week. Foreshadowing. At that point, the word means thing I noticed, not thing the author intentionally set up. So we need to put the word back on a leash. Foreshadowing, in the classical sense, is specific and planned. An author already knows the payoff. They already know the gun goes off in Act 3, so they hang the gun on the mantelpiece in Act 1. Not a mysterious shape. Not weapon vibes. A gun. Chekhov's gun works because there's a direct, intentional line between setup and payoff. When Oda shows you Laboon and then, years later, reveals Brook's backstory, that's not a vibe. That's a loaded weapon fired on schedule. Now contrast that with retrofitting. Retrofitting is when an author takes some earlier, fuzzy element and later assigns it a sharper meaning. The prop was just a broom in Season 1. In Season 4, the writers repaint it, add a barrel, and suddenly it's a gun. This is not a sin. This is not bad writing. This is in fact how most long-running manga survive weekly serialization without exploding. Scipia's Mantra is the textbook example, an observation-based power system that Oda later cleans up into Haki. It feels smooth because the original idea was loose enough to absorb the new definition. And then there's the thing I actually care about for Blackbeard, pre-writing. Listen to me, because this is where people's brains either light up or uninstall. Pre-writing is when an author has already decided the ending, the core mysteries, the big reveals before Chapter 1. They know the shooting scene, they know who dies, they know who the traitor is. So when they put the gun on the mantelpiece, they're not hinting at a future decision. They're placing a fragment of a decision that already exists in a notebook. Pattern interrupt. What if the gun isn't the prop at all? What if the real prop is a locked box on stage? That's pre-writing's favorite toy. You put a sealed box in the corner of the set. You are absolutely planning to open it. You just haven't fully decided whether it contains a gun, a letter, or a screaming clown. It's modular, it's flexible, it's clearly intentional, but not fully specified. This is fine. This is normal. And once you understand those three categories, the loaded gun of foreshadowing, the repainted prop of retrofitting, and the mysterious box of pre-writing, you can finally start asking the real question: which one is Oda using on Blackbeard's never sleeps, his teeth, and those three skulls? Why weekly manga can't be 100% master plan, and that's fine. So here's where we need to pump the brakes on the Oda planned every Blackbeard atom in 1997 meme. Because listen to me, weekly manga is not a cathedral built in one sitting. It's a guy sprinting up scaffolding every 7 days, hammer in his teeth, praying the whole thing doesn't fall over. Here's the thing. A normal One Piece week is 15 to 20 pages. That's rough thumbnails, then cleaned pencils, then inks. In between that, he's in editor meetings where someone is going, "Can we get a big spread here? Can we push this reveal earlier?" Surveys dipped last issue, then revisions, then volume corrections where he quietly redraws panels or tweaks dialogue. On top of that, he's sketching future arcs, refining the endgame, juggling movie tie-ins, supervising world-building notes. And he does this for decades. You cannot perfectly lock in a 25-year Blackbeard flowchart under that schedule without your brain melting out of your ears. Think about Marineford. That wasn't just Oda in a room going, narratively, this would be elegant. That was Shonen Jump, needing a mega event to spike magazine sales. The anime staff begging for material they can pace. The editor going, "We should bring all the big names on stage." Wano's length? Part story ambition, part external reality, popularity, deadlines, production pipelines. Those huge arcs are not a pristine outline preserved in amber. They're a wrestling match between the author's plan and the industry's needs. So when fans say, Oda knew every detail of Blackbeard's body, his 3 skulls, his never sleeps thing, the exact 2 fruits, all on day 1, I need you to hear how insane that sounds in context. If that were literally true, Oda is either a time traveler or he has been in a 25-year psychological hostage situation with his own notebook. In that world, a single change, an editor asking for more ace, a survey spike for lore, an anime delay, would snap the whole structure. The series would just collapse under that rigidity. And this is where retrofitting comes in. Retrofitting is not cheating. This is not a sin. This is survival. In a weekly system, you plant a flexible seed. Teacher's weird. His body is atypical. He never sleeps. And you intentionally keep the category open. Is it 3 souls? A Cerberus model? A D-related mutation? You don't have to fully specify it in 1999. You need it to be promotable later. You need to be able to grab that never sleeps line or those shifting teeth and upgrade them into a major pillar once you know how big Blackbeard's role actually becomes. And here's the fun part. Understanding that pressure cooker doesn't make Oda less impressive. It makes him scarier. Because now we can start separating the genuine pre-written Blackbeard decisions from the elegant retrofits. Which details were fixed before Chapter 1 and which ones did he cleverly elevate once he realized, oh, this guy isn't just a mid-boss, he's the dark mirror to Luffy. That's where we're going next. Real foreshadowing 101. What Oda actually has to do for it to count. So if we're going to separate Oda is a wizard from Oda is a very organized human man with a notebook, we need to get brutally clear on what actually counts as foreshadowing. Not vibes, not coincidences, foreshadowing. Here's the thing, intent is the whole ball game. For something to be foreshadowing, the panel, the line, the prop has to exist because the author already knows the specific payoff they're driving toward. Not, I'll do something cool with this guy someday. A decision, a target. The setup is born because the payoff is already in the author's head. Classic example. In Act 1, we see character A quietly tape a pistol under the dining table before a big family dinner. The camera lingers. No one comments. In Act 3, that exact pistol is used in a betrayal during the climax. That's foreshadowing, because the author put the gun there for that betrayal. Now contrast that with a random background pistol on the wall in Chapter 2 that the author never thought about again, until Chapter 80, when they go, "Oh, that'd be neat, I'll say that was loaded all along." That second case? That's retrofitting. Same object on the page. Completely different category of writing. This is not a sin. This is not bad storytelling. This is in fact how most long series survive. Authors retrofit. They improvise. They grab old toys from the sandbox and pretend they always meant to do that. This is fine. This is normal. But it is not foreshadowing in the strict sense we're using. Now, why does this pedantic distinction matter for Blackbeard? Because the whole community keeps pointing at every weird teach panel and yelling, "Oda planned this from Jaya." And I need you to slow down. If Oda, at Jaya, already knew exactly how Teach's body worked, knew the number of devil fruits, knew the mechanic for stealing them, then yes, those early scenes are foreshadowing. The never sleeps line, the Jolly Roger with 3 skulls, the teeth, all of it becomes deliberate scaffolding. But if all he had was, "This guy is special, tied to darkness, endgame villain, I'll nail the biology later," that's not foreshadowing. That's pre-writing plus future problem solving. And here's where I'm going to be a little mean to our collective one-piece brain. Most competent authors use real foreshadowing constantly, but on a small scale. Character quirks that set up a mini-twist. A throwaway gag that later reveals a trauma. Sanji's Mr. Prince persona. Kinemon's dragon gag. That's normal craft. But hyper-specific 20-year, I already know the exact soul physics of this man's body and the precise number of fruits he'll hold. Foreshadowing? That is rare. That is risky. You lock yourself into a corner for 2 decades. One editorial mandate, and you're cooked. So, going forward, we're playing on hard mode. Listen to me. We're only going to grant the Blackbeard hints a foreshadowing badge if they meet 3 brutal criteria. Specificity. The detail has to meaningfully point toward a concrete payoff, not just he's spooky. Necessity. The payoff actually needs that setup to land. You could not swap it out for anything else. And consistency over time. Oda has to keep treating that detail as true from Jaya to Egghead without quietly rewriting it. We're going to take those criteria and slam them against the Jolly Roger, the teeth, the never sleeps line, and the devil fruit theft method. Which of these are real planted guns, and which are Jesus in toast moments from a desperate fandom? That's the fun part. Retrofitting isn't cheating. How long series actually stay coherent? And here's where we need to have a slightly uncomfortable conversation, because once you start separating real foreshadowing from Jesus in toast moments, you hit the third rail of the community. Retrofitting. Retrofitting is simple. An author looks back at an old fuzzy detail, a throwaway line, a background symbol, a side character who existed to fill panel space, and later goes, "Actually, that was important all along," then builds new meaning around it. The old scene didn't carry that precise intentional payload at the time. The new story reaches back and wires it in. And listen to me. This is not a sin. This is not bad writing. This is in fact how most long serialized storytelling stays coherent over decades. Foreshadowing is when the gun is on the mantle because you already planned the shooting. Retrofitting is when you notice, 10 volumes later, oh hey, there's a random rifle in that bar scene, and you decide retroactively that this was the murder weapon all along. In a weekly manga, that's not cheating. That's survival. No human being has a perfect 25-year, panel-by-panel blueprint. Oda had the endgame, the big mysteries, the broad Blackbeard role planned. He did not have a spreadsheet in 1997 that said, Chapter 225, Teeth Panel 3 will later support Cerberus discourse on Twitter. The industry doesn't work that way. Here's the thing. Editors exist. Popularity polls exist. Sales meetings exist. If a character like Blackbeard suddenly lands with fans, Jaya hits, the people's dreams never-end speech becomes iconic, an editor is absolutely going to nudge Oda. We need more of this guy. He can carry bigger weight. And then what does a smart author do? He mentally walks back through everything he's already drawn and starts mining. The three-skull Jolly Roger, the never sleeps gag, Marco's atypical bodyline, those become seeds he can upgrade into major lore clues. Pattern interrupt. The alternative is worse. The alternative is you never retrofit anything, you never reuse an old element, and every new twist drops out of nowhere with zero connective tissue. That's not purity. That's bad writing. The quality test is not, was this preordained in Chapter 1? The quality test is, does the retrofit feel organic? If the new meaning violently contradicts the old portrayal, readers feel scammed. If tomorrow Oda said Blackbeard was secretly a time-traveling robot from Buggy's planet, you would feel the whiplash in your spine. But when Teach gets the second devil fruit and Marco goes, yeah, his body's weird, that's probably why, it doesn't clash with anything. It smooths things together, and that smoothness is evidence of craft, not necessarily of 4D chess. Fans want to believe in omniscient planning because it flatters our pattern recognition. We want to be the genius detective, not the pattern-seeking monkey who sees Jesus in toast. Authors, meanwhile, want flexibility. They need the freedom to respond to new ideas, new constraints, and oh God, this arc is too long, without detonating the story. So when we talk about Blackbeard's secret, I need you to hold both categories in your head. Some pieces were always on the board. Some pieces were retrofitted into place. The fun is figuring out which is which, and the next section is where we start cutting specific Blackbeard scenes open to see how they were built. The third thing Oda does, pre-writing, and why Blackbeard screams it. So here's the problem. Foreshadowing and retrofitting still don't fully explain what Oda is doing with Blackbeard. You can feel there's a third thing happening, but the vocabulary we usually throw around in this community just kind of wheezes and dies when it tries to pin it down. And listen to me, I went looking for the fancy narratology term. I tried. I dug into craft books, interviews, story theory, all of it. There are adjacent ideas, sure, but nothing that cleanly covers what's going on with characters like Blackbeard or Imu. So I'm going to commit a small academic crime and just name it myself. I'm calling it pre-writing. Here's the thing. Pre-writing, in the way I'm using it here, is when an author very intentionally plants a big conspicuous mystery or motif early on, fully committed that it will matter, but leaves the exact answer flexible until the larger story shape solidifies. The author is not winging it. The author is not discovering the story on Tuesday in the shower. The author is putting a gun on the mantelpiece, knowing someone is getting shot, but still deciding which character pulls the trigger and why. Think about Blackbeard's three-skull Jolly Roger. Think about the never sleeps line from his crew. Think about Marco in Marineford saying Teach's body is atypical, that this is why he can hold multiple devil fruits. Those are not loose throwaway details. Those are locked doors with spotlights on them. Oda is screaming at you that Teach's body is wrong. What he is not doing, at least at first, is publishing the full technical manual of how it works. Pre-writing is staging. It is theatre blocking. You walk on stage in Act 1, you bolt a massive steel door into the set, you shine a floodlight on it, and you have the characters nervously glance at it every 10 minutes. You absolutely 100% plan to open that door in Act 3. You just have not fully decided whether there is a dragon, a time machine, or your editor's tax audit behind it. You only know whatever is back there will sit at the center of the climax. And this is where Oda becomes an outlier. Most long-running authors lean heavily on retrofitting. This is not a sin. This is normal. They toss in a weird line, forget about it, then years later go, oh, that could be a prophecy. Oda, with Blackbeard, does something harsher. He commits, very early, to the existence of a massive secret about Teach's body, his soul, his multiplicity, and then keeps the exact mechanics slightly blurred so he can refine them as the Void Century, the Will of D, and even Gear 5 snap into place. Fans feel that blur and our pattern-seeking monkey brain goes, teeth errors, Cerberus, 3 personalities, Jesus in toast. And honestly, this is fine. The point is not that every panel was fully spec'd out in 1999. The point is that Oda locked the door on stage and only later finalized what precise monster was living behind it. So here's what we're going to do next. We're going to walk through Blackbeard's appearances in order and sort each clue into a category. True foreshadowing, later retrofits, and this third thing, pre-writing. Because Blackbeard's secret only actually makes sense once you admit that third category exists and once you see which doors Oda bolted down before he ever found the keys. Before One Piece, how another series faked genius planning. Before we unleash that on Blackbeard, I need you to step into a safer sandbox with me. Because if I start by telling you your favorite Blackbeard theory is retrofitting, half the comments are already on fire. So we're going to talk Naruto, we're going to talk Toby, you remember this. Masked idiot in an orange spiral, doing Fortnite dances before Fortnite existed, getting bonked by Deidara. Then, many chapters later, mask comes off. Surprise, it's Obito. And overnight the community went, Kishimoto is a god, the foreshadowing was insane. Screenshots everywhere. Threads reconstructing a 4D chess plan that allegedly started the moment Obito died under that boulder. So what were the supposed hints? You get the mask design with the single eye hole on the same side Obito lost. You get the goofy personality that, in hindsight, reads as an act. You get Toby knowing way too much about Kakashi and the Sharingan. You get the timing. Toby shows up not that long after we learn Kakashi's backstory. So fans go, see, it was planned. It had to be planned. Here's the thing. When you actually dig into author evidence, the story gets a lot less mystical and a lot more human. Kishimoto has said in interviews that certain long-running threads, including who Toby really was, shifted during serialization. Early materials and production notes point to Toby being, at various planning stages, a separate character, a Madara stand-in, or a more generic Uchiha remnant. In other words, the pristine, crystal-clear original plan the community worships. It has smudges. It has eraser marks. This is not a sin. This is not bad writing. This is normal. Retrofitting is when an author takes an existing piece on the board and later decides, actually, that's the bishop I'm going to crown as queen, then goes back and makes it mostly line up. Toby was already a masked villain. Obito already existed in the emotional core of Kakashi's flashback. Connecting them later is efficient, emotionally potent, and, from a production standpoint, very smart. But a lot of what fans call foreshadowing there is really the pattern-seeking monkey in our brain seeing Jesus in toast. The mask swirl? Easy to justify after the fact. The goofiness? Easy to reframe as a performance. The Kakashi comments? Any mystery Uchiha could have dropped those. Once Kishimoto commits to Obito, he can steer future scenes to reinforce that choice and make earlier, vaguer material appear intentional from day one. Emotionally, the Obito reveal still hits. Thematically, it still resonates. That's the important part for most readers, and this is fine. But technically, in the categories we're building, this is mostly retrofit with some patchwork foreshadowing stapled on once the decision hardened. It is very different from an author who, before Chapter 1, writes in their notebook, Character X has a 3-part soul structure. Here are the rules. And then spends 20 years staging crumbs around that fixed rule. And listen to me, that distinction matters. Because when we go back to Blackbeard in a second, you need to know whether we're looking at a Toby-style retrofit or at something much scarier, a villain whose impossible body was locked in before we ever saw his missing teeth. The pattern-seeking monkey in your brain, and why Blackbeard feeds it. So before we drag Blackbeard into the witness stand, we need to talk about the other problem in the room, your brain. Specifically, the tiny pattern-seeking monkey that lives in your skull and keeps screaming, 3 skulls on a flag, Cerberus confirmed. Here's the thing, that monkey is not stupid. It is ancient. For most of human history, if you saw a shadow in the grass and assumed tiger when it was just wind, you felt silly. If you assumed wind when it was a tiger, you died. Evolution tuned us to over-detect patterns. False positive? Embarrassing. False negative? Funeral. That's why people see Jesus in toast. That's why you can't unsee constellations in what is, objectively, just random star clutter. That's why there are entire YouTube channels drawing Illuminati triangles on corporate logos and insisting this proves a secret cabal controls the price of orange juice. This is not a sin. This is normal. Your brain would rather be a paranoid conspiracy theorist than a corpse. Now port that straight into the One Piece community. We stare at panels for hours. We freeze frame anime episodes. We zoom in on background barrels. Of course, fans start hunting for hidden threes and skulls in every Blackbeard shot. 3 bubbles in the bath? Cerberus. 3 clouds behind his ship? Cerberus. Someone in the back row holding 3 bread rolls? Brother in Christ, that is lunch. This is where confirmation bias walks in and pours gasoline on everything. Once you decide Blackbeard is a Cerberus Zoan, your brain quietly flips a switch. Suddenly every 3-shaped object is glowing neon, and every mundane, boring counterexample just slides off the page. You remember the Jolly Roger with 3 skulls, but not the dozen other crews with weird flags that never meant anything. You remember Marco saying Teach's body is atypical, but you don't remember that Marco also speaks vaguely all the time because Oda enjoys being a menace. And listen to me, I am not above this. I have absolutely screenshot Blackbeard's teeth at 2 AM and gone, aha, the gap moved, therefore 3 souls. Then you realize Oda draws Nami's proportions differently between panels on the same page, and no one claims she's secretly 3 people in a trench coat. Inconsistent teeth on a mystery character feel intentional. Inconsistent everything on a non-mystery character? We just call that weekly serialization. So here's the rule. For the rest of this video, we are treating Blackbeard evidence like a court case. No vibes. No, it just feels planned. A pattern only counts if it repeats, if it shows up in context, and if it is backed by dialogue, structure, or Oda's own comments. 1 panel with a weird shadow is Jesus in toast. 10 panels, across sagas, echoing the same specific idea. Now we can start whispering foreshadowing. Pattern interrupt. I need you to assume, for the next section, that Blackbeard is innocent. Pretend he is just a guy with terrible dental care and a good PR team. If the patterns we're about to walk through still hold up under that assumption, then we're not feeding the monkey anymore. We're finally putting it on a leash. Enter Blackbeard. Why Jaya is the real start of his mystery. So if Blackbeard is innocent for a second, we need to go back to where the crime scene actually starts. Jaya. Not Marineford, not Impel Down. A dingy bar, a bad pie, and a drunk argument about dreams. Because that's the first moment Oda walks Blackbeard onto the stage, looks you dead in the eyes and says, "This one, remember this one." Here's the thing. In Jaya, Teach is not framed as a villain. He's framed as a weirdo parallel. Luffy and Zoro get laughed out of town for believing in Skypia. They sit down, they order food, and this random round guy at the counter starts screaming about how people's dreams never end. He's not opposing Luffy's philosophy. He's echoing it, beat for beat. It's the exact same speech pattern, just coming out of a body that feels off. And then Oda does the food bit. This is where the community turns into that pattern-seeking monkey who sees Jesus in toast. But listen to me, this one is actually on purpose. Luffy hates the cherry pie. Blackbeard loves it. Luffy loves the drink. Blackbeard spits it out. Total reversal. Yet the paneling keeps cutting between them, as if they're the same species of idiot. Same posture, same grin, same "this is the best energy," just with the preferences flipped. That's not random gag territory. That's distorted mirror storytelling. You get the thesis right there. Same dream, opposite taste. Luffy is the kid who will chase his own dream, even if the world laughs. Teach is the guy who will chase his dream, even if the world burns. Same category of obsession, different moral direction. Now, the pronoun problem. The infamous "they" line. The townsfolk refer to Blackbeard as they instead of he, and suddenly we have 20 years of multiple souls threads. Is it a translation quirk? Sure. Could it be nothing? Also sure. But the key for foreshadowing is intentional weirdness, and Oda goes out of his way to make the grammar feel wrong. You don't accidentally frame your new dream speech guy with a plural pronoun and then slap 3 skulls on his Jolly Roger later. At minimum, he's planting the idea that Teach doesn't fit cleanly into one man, one body. Notice what's missing though. No devil fruit gimmick. No explicit, his body is special narration. Just ideological mirroring, visual pairing, and a linguistic glitch. That's pre-writing territory. The author has clearly decided, this is Luffy's dark reflection, this is a strange existence, this is important. But the exact mechanic, Cerberus, 3 souls, whatever, you can feel that hasn't been spelled out on the page yet. So I need you to sit with that question. In Jaya, how much did Oda already know? Was he just locking in final test for Luffy's dream and a general abnormal body flag? Or had he already written the scene where Marco spells it out? Because if Jaya is the moment he plants the flag that this guy is different, then every appearance after this has to either confirm that plan or reveal where the plan evolved, and that's where the timeline starts getting very uncomfortable. Jaya under the microscope, dreams, plural, and the first slip-up, which dumps us right back on Jaya, because this is the first time Oda lets the mask slip. You remember that scene. Luffy's face is in the dirt, belly's empty, dreams laughed out of the bar. And then this sweaty weirdo with a cherry pie opinion crime walks in and delivers one of the most important speeches in the series. People's dreams never end. Not a person's dream. Not your dream. Plural. Collective. As if he's not just defending his own ambition, but speaking on behalf of a whole crowd that we can't see yet. Listen to me, that plural is doing work. In universe, it scans as humanity's dreams. But paired with everything we know now, it reads disturbingly well as our dreams, as in the internal committee currently renting space in Marshall D. Teach's ribcage. Oda frames him with Luffy-style passion, arms thrown wide, teeth bared, panel exploding with motion. But the content of the speech is darker, more acquisitive. Luffy wants to reach the summit. Teach wants to own the mountain and the sky, and probably charge admission, and look at how Oda draws him in that stretch. The panel composition is quietly vicious. When Teach stands to shout about dreams, the angle tilts up from below, making him loom over the reader and over the cowed townsfolk. Heavy cross-hatching under the eyes, exaggerated shadows under the hat brim, a body that seems too big for the bar. Then, a beat later, Oda flips him into this almost clownish, wide-mouthed glutton shoveling food. It's tonal whiplash on purpose. You're supposed to laugh and then feel weird about laughing. Here's the thing. That visual coding, goofy silhouette, ominous shading, is exactly how you telegraph this guy is 2 things at once without putting a neon sign over his head. We need to stop pretending those off-kilter angles are random. Oda is an absurd control freak about paneling. When someone is consistently drawn looming, framed in shadow, and yet written as a joke, that's not an accident. That's a category flag. Now, the pronoun problem. In some English translations of Jaya, you get that infamous they around Teach. In Japanese, it's not a clean, literal plural of his identity. It's more grammatically mushy, more about his crew or people in general. So no, this is not courtroom-proof foreshadowing that there are 3 dudes in a trench coat. But notice what the author does not do. He never rushes to clarify Teach's oneness. He's very comfortable letting ambiguity pool around this man's selfhood. And all of this is happening in the same arc where the romance of the Age of Pirates and the Will of D start humming in the background. Jaya is where inherited will stops being a trivia fact and starts feeling mythic. Nolan's story, the knock-up stream, the Sky Island rumors. Everyone's chasing someone else's unfinished dream. Put Teach's speech back into that context, and it feels, retroactively, like a dark Joy Boy echo. Luffy is the sunlit answer to people's dreams never end. Teach is the Stormcloud version. So where does this fall in our categories? Most of it is pre-writing. Oda is building a thematic mirror, a mystery aura, a guy who can stand opposite Luffy in the final chapter without needing a last-minute power-up. But that people's dreams plural, paired with the looming shadows and the non-clarified pronoun haze, that might cross the line into genuine multi-will foreshadowing. Not proof, not a solved equation. Enough that when Marco later says his body is atypical, you feel the click. And if Jaya is the first slip-up, the first time the mask wobbles, then the next teach appearance does something much worse. It stops wobbling and starts cracking. Drum Island's ghost. Was Blackbeard's off-screen attack a hidden blueprint? So when we cut to Drum Island and hear that Whitebeard ran away because a single pirate crew wiped his kingdom off the map, that's not just wow, strong guys exist. That's the mask cracking. That's Oda quietly slipping Blackbeard's silhouette into the story before we even know what we're looking at. Remember the backstory. Whitebeard abandons his own people, flees on his toy box ship, and when the Straw Hats arrive, Drum is a frozen corpse of a country. The doctors are gone. The towns are burned. The only explanation is this off-screen raid by some unknown monster crew. Then, way later, Oda goes, "Oh yeah, that was Teach. That was Blackbeard's guys passing through on the way to Alabasta." Here's the thing. That retroactive label matters. By stapling Blackbeard's name onto a pre-Straw Hat tragedy, the author turns him into a kind of narrative background radiation. He exists even when he isn't there. Your brain starts quietly rewriting the timeline. While Luffy is clowning on Buggy, while we're meeting Chopper, this other D is already reshaping countries off-panel. That's not just power scaling, that's storytelling weight. Now, did Oda plan that from day one of Drum? Or did he do the classic, "Oh, I have a perfect candidate" move once Teach became a main villain? This is where the community loves to go full pattern-seeking monkey who sees Jesus in toast. He always meant it was Blackbeard. He had the three-skull Jolly Roger drawn in his kindergarten notebook. I need you to breathe. If we're being honest, the evidence points to a hybrid, the existence of a devastating mystery crew. Very planned. That's modular pre-writing. You insert a blank slot labeled terrifying pirate into the world, knowing future you can plug a major antagonist into it. The fact that it's specifically Teach, with his specific ideology and body mystery, that smells more retrofit. And this is not a sin. This is fine. This is normal for long serialization. Does Drum foreshadow his weird body? Maybe. Maybe not. The scale of the carnage could be read as, this guy's powers are abnormal. But at that stage, we don't even know devil fruits can be stacked, so it's doing more work for his legend than his gimmick. A crew that erases a kingdom off-screen is a vibe. It primes you to accept later that this is a guy who breaks rules, even metaphysical ones. So I'd classify Drum as retrofitting in the narrow sense, pre-writing in the structural sense. Oda clearly wanted a roaming disaster he could attach to an endgame villain, and Blackbeard slotted in perfectly once the Yami and the Gura and the atypical bodyline existed. That modular planning style is the point. He builds sockets, then chooses which plug to insert. And listen to me, because this is the pattern interrupt. Drum is the last time Blackbeard's horror is entirely off-screen. From here on, Oda stops just telling you he's a monster and starts showing you in ways that directly poke at the body mystery. Ace versus Blackbeard. The first time Oda shows us the monster. So when we hit Ace versus Blackbeard, Oda basically goes, "All right, you've heard the ghost stories, now I'm turning the lights on." This is the first time the community stops seeing Teach as a weird Jaya gag man and starts seeing him as the thing that's going to eat the story. Ace hunts him down for killing Thatch. Very simple revenge premise. Very Western. Very straightforward. Except here's the thing. Oda uses that straightforward duel to hard pivot Teach from mysterious mirror to Luffy into existential physics glitch in human form. The reveal of the Yami Yami no Mi is not just, oh cool darkness fruit. It's gravity. It's a black hole. It drags Ace out of his Logia intangibility, slams him into the ground, and tells you in one panel that the rules of devil fruits are negotiable. Listen to me. Blackbeard's little speech about this fruit is pure author intent leaking onto the page. He says he waited decades on Whitebeard's crew for this one power. He talks about fate. about how this fruit chose him. That's not just flavor text. That is Oda underlining in red that Teach is built on long-term, pre-written obsession. You do not sit on a Yonko ship for years, pretend to be a background extra, and then oops into the most broken fruit in the story. That's planned. Ace's horror is our horror. When Teach explains that his darkness doesn't let attacks pass through, it actually increases the pain. Ace literally calls it out as more dangerous than normal Logias. This is not a sin. This is not bad shonen power creep. This is Oda quietly introducing a category of ability whose entire theme is nullification, absorption, theft. The darkness swallows everything. It pulls devil fruit users in and turns their powers off. You don't need a PhD in foreshadowing to see where that's pointing. And crucially, at this moment, he still has only one fruit. We need to sit with that. E2, the body mystery isn't on the table textually yet. No atypical body line, no Gura theft. But the storytelling is already gluing Teach to ideas of unnatural darkness, gravity, and stealing what should be untouchable. As an example of pre-writing, this is clean. Oda establishes the conceptual socket, a power that erases other powers, long before he plugs in the multi-fruit gimmick. Then there's the scars and the aftermath. Ace marks Teach's face, and Teach keeps that scar forever. In a story where wounds are often symbolic, that's Oda saying, "This encounter will echo." Immediately after, what does Teach do? He walks into Impel Down and starts recruiting monsters. He collects prisoners, collects futures, drags people out of the destinies the world assigned them. He's doing with people what his fruit does with powers. I need you to notice the classification problem here. The Yami is a theft/nullification fruit. That's genuine, intentional foreshadowing for devil fruit stealing. It's too thematically perfect, too mechanically aligned to be an accident. The one body, two fruits biology, though, still feels fuzzy here. That's pre-writing territory. Oda knows Teach is special, knows there's a body trick, but the exact mechanics are not locked on this page. And this is fine. This is normal. An author can have the endpoint, Blackbeard as the vacuum cleaner of dreams, without having every line of the instruction manual written yet. The Ace fight is the moment he shows you the vacuum. The later arcs are where he finally opens it up and explains why it shouldn't exist. The Yami Yami no Mi, power description or hidden anatomy lesson. So when Blackbeard finally explains the Yami Yami no Mi to Ace, this is not just a cool power demo. This is Oda handing you the user manual in tiny, cursed font. Teach tells him this darkness sucks in everything. It's gravity. It's the most evil power in the world. And then he drops the weirdest line in the whole scene. Unlike other Logias, he can't become the element. He takes the hit. He feels all the pain. Here's the thing. That last part should set off sirens in your head. Logias are defined by intangibility. Enel turns into lightning and gets skewered for free. Crocodile becomes sand and needs water or haki to even register damage. Ace is literal fire. Bullets don't matter. But Oda goes out of his way to have Teach brag and then immediately undercut himself. Yes, he can pull everything into darkness, but the trade-off is that every attack lands harder. Why introduce a drawback that extreme, that specific, on page 1 of the fruit's debut? I need you to notice the category difference here. This isn't, oh Gomu Gomu means I'm bad at swimming. This is my Logia breaks the basic rule of Logias. The author is flagging Yami Yami as structurally wrong, not just thematically edgy. Fans treat it as flavor text, a cool way to show Teach is a masochist tank, but from a writing perspective, it's a giant sticky note that says, this fruit does not play by the same metaphysics. So we need to ask the uncomfortable question. Is that pain absorption drawback actually a drawback? Or is it a hint that Blackbeard's body and soul are already built to take on more than one person should? The whole point of the scene is Ace being horrified that Teach can stand back up after being obliterated. Maybe the reason he can't disperse the damage is because the fruit is doing something else with what it pulls in. Maybe you only give this fruit to a man whose internal architecture is already under renovation. And listen to me, the pulling in language is not subtle. Everything is sucked in. Nothing escapes. darkness that drags powers into contact and refuses to let them exist independently. When you fast forward to Marineford and see Teach physically grab Whitebeard's corpse and somehow extract the Gura Gura no Mi, that doesn't feel random anymore. It feels planned. The ace fight is the tutorial explaining that Yami doesn't just negate, it absorbs, it owns. Once you see that, the future feats stop being shocking and start being inevitabilities. Of course, the guy whose darkness eats your element and forces your real body out is the one who can steal the concept of your fruit. Of course, the man whose logia refuses intangibility is the one whose body will later be called atypical by Marco. The fruit is an absorber, the vessel is a container. That's not retrofitting, that's pre-writing, which leaves one very nasty thread hanging. If the power is about absorbing and the body is abnormal, the real secret isn't two fruits. It's how many souls, how many wills, how many distinct selves can that body safely hold? And the story will literally have Marco walk on stage and say that out loud. But the way Oda stages that line implies something even worse than the fandom's favourite Cerberus theory. Marineford's tarp scene. Oda shows you the trick and dares you to notice. So we need to go to Marineford. We need to go to the single most suspicious blue tarp in the history of storytelling. You remember the sequence. Whitebeard is dead. The war is at a boiling point, and in strolls Teach, already holding the Yami Yami no Mi, already established as the guy whose darkness pulls in everything. He and his crew throw this tarp over Whitebeard's corpse. They all crawl under it. The entire battlefield freaks out. And when the tarp comes off, the Gura Gura no Mi has transferred. Teach now has quake powers in one hand and cosmic vacuum in the other. And we do not see how. Here's the thing. Oda is zooming in on every other Marineford detail. Akainu's magma fist melting half of Whitebeard's face. Kobe's tiny heartbeat of courage. Shanks walking in and ending the war with a sentence. This is a war arc flex from an author who loves to over-explain mechanics. But for the single most broken, unprecedented devil fruit interaction in the series, curtain, black box, literal tarp. That is not an accident. That is not, it'd be off panel anyway. That is an author saying, I'm going to show you the setup and the outcome, and I dare you to reverse engineer the method. The community kept treating it as plot magic, or a future tech explanation, or some secret Yami Yami sub-function. But Oda himself will later walk Marco on stage and tell you that's the wrong category. Post-war, when we catch up with the remnants of the Whitebeard pirates, Marco says it outright. Teach's body is atypical. Not his fruit, not his haki, his body. And Marco frames that as the reason he can hold multiple devil fruits. That one word is Oda taking a red pen and underlining 3 times. This is biological or soul-based. Stop blaming the gravity fruit. Listen to me. That's Oda retroactively upgrading a pre-writing decision into explicit foreshadowing. By Marineford, Teach has already been planned as the multi-fruit user, the dark mirror to Luffy, the endgame antagonist. The tarp scene is him cashing in 1 chip from a stack he's been sitting on since Jaya. The atypical body line is him telling you that Chip was never arbitrary. It was always about what that body can contain. And once you accept that, the mystery sharpens. If the body is the key, what is different about it? Is it multiple souls? Fragmented consciousness? Some D-clan quirk that turns one human into a walking apartment complex for wills? I need you to notice how fast your brain starts reaching for Cerberus theories, 3-skull Jolly Rogers, and that never sleeps line. This is not a sin. This is normal. You are a pattern-seeking monkey seeing Jesus in toast because Oda keeps toasting the same image. The rest of the video is me slowing that instinct down, taking every visual motif, every weird tooth panel, every they versus he line, and asking, what did the author actually plan here? Marco spills the beans. A typical body, and what it really implies. So when Marco finally opens his mouth about Teach, this is Oda grabbing you by the collar. Marco says, and I'm paraphrasing the official wording here, that Blackbeard's body is a little different. atypical. And that's why he can steal Whitebeard's Gura Gura no Mi on top of the Yami Yami without exploding the way every devil fruit rulebook says he should. That is not a vibes-based diagnosis. That is a veteran commander, the guy who watched Whitebeard's crew cycle through fruits and powers for decades, giving you the in-universe explanation. He's not Vegapunk. He's not doing peer-reviewed science. But he is the closest thing the story has to a medical professional who also understands devil fruits as a practical battlefield category. When he says, Teach's body is different, that's why. That's the author telling you, circle this panel. Here's the thing. If Oda wanted this to be pure plot armor, he had a much easier option. He could have never addressed it. He could have left Blackbeard's double fruit stunt as mysterious endgame nonsense and moved on. Instead, he stops Marineford dead to have Marco flag a concrete, knowable anomaly. That's intentional. That's planned. That is not the behavior of an author hand-waving his own rules. That's an author putting a sticky note on the mystery and saying, yes, there is an answer. Now, we need to be honest about what Marco can't know. He doesn't have a microscope that sees souls. He hasn't read the Void Century research papers. So when he says body, he's using the vocabulary the community in that world actually has. But in One Piece, body is a messy fusion of flesh, spirit, name, shadow, and will. Brook's soul leaves his skeleton and still counts as him. Moria yanks shadows out of people, and they carry fighting styles and personality tics. Big Mom tears off fragments of her own lifespan, and those homies inherit her fear triggers and emotional wiring. In other words, the story has already done the heavy lifting to tell you that souls, shadows, personalities, all of that, are manipulable entities. They are components. They can be split, stored, reassigned. So when Marco says atypical body, I need you to hear a typical configuration of those components. Not he has stretchy organs, but something about how his will, his soul, his whatever you want to call it is arranged is fundamentally off-spec. Pattern interrupt. What if the important organ Blackbeard is missing is a singular self? Listen to me. That immediately cleans up 3 different problems. It explains the multi-fruit capacity. It retrofits the early they versus he line from Jaya into deliberate foreshadowing instead of a translation mistake. And it harmonizes with the 3-skull Jolly Roger and the never sleeps detail as symptoms of multiple wills cohabiting one physical form. So the hypothesis I'm pushing, and we'll stress test it in the next section, is that atypical body is best read as atypical soul configuration. Multiple souls, multiple personalities, one meat suit. This is not a sin. This is normal for Oda's world building. And if that's true, then every Blackbeard scene stops being random chaos and starts reading as different internal captains taking the wheel. The teeth thing, error, meme, or deliberate visual code. And once you start reading Blackbeard as a carpool situation for multiple captains, there's one visual detail that suddenly stops being a meme and starts being evidence. His teeth. His stupid, cursed quantum teeth. If you've only watched the anime, you might not have felt this, but manga readers in the community know exactly what I'm talking about. Sometimes Teach has a mouthful of jagged, crowded teeth. Sometimes he's missing whole chunks, big gaps that make him look half rotten. Sometimes the gaps migrate. You get Jaya Teach with a certain pattern, then Marineford Teach with a different dental arrangement, then post-time skip panels where the missing teeth are just back. No surgery, no explanation, just a jump cut to a new mouth. Now, the boring answer is, Oda draws sloppy, stop overthinking it. And listen to me, that's a fair instinct. Oda is a speed demon author working on brutal deadlines. He has admitted to errors. We have the classic height inconsistencies, the occasional scar on the wrong side, the infamous SBS where he goes, yeah, I forgot. This is not a sin. This is fine. Human beings drawing weekly comics will make continuity mistakes. But here's the thing. Most of those errors are one-offs. They get quietly corrected in the volume release, or they never show up again in a major close-up. With Blackbeard's teeth, the error is persistent. It shows up across arcs, across eras, in big dramatic panels where Oda is clearly paying attention. And it's concentrated on one character who is already drenched in mystery flags. Compare that to other major players. Luffy's scar pattern is stable once it's established. Zoro's eye, Sanji's eyebrows, Robin's nose, Nami's jawline. In official volume art and serious close-ups, these designs are locked. You can track them from Water 7 to Wano, and they're basically copy-paste. When Oda wants a face to be stable, it stays stable. That's the baseline for his storytelling. Teach is the exception. The teeth shift. The jawline subtly bulks or slims. The grin reads different from arc to arc in a way that goes beyond "my style evolved." And when you put that next to Marco literally calling his body atypical, next to the three-skull Jolly Roger, next to the "never sleeps" line, the dental chaos starts to feel less random and more planned. If Blackbeard is effectively multiple people sharing one body, what's the one facial feature you can tweak to signal a different driver without breaking recognizability? You don't give him 3 heads. That would blow the twist. You nudge the teeth. You let one persona have more gaps, another a fuller grin, a third a slightly different bite. It's subtle, it's goofy, and it fits Oda's sense of humor about hiding horror inside slapstick. I need you to understand the category here. I'm not calling this airtight foreshadowing. At best, this is pre-writing adjacent, a visual motif that lines up suspiciously well with a multi-soul plan Oda probably had in his notes. On its own, it's never going to convince a skeptic. But stacked with everything else, it stops being a random art quirk and starts becoming one more tile in the mosaic. And the moment you accept that Oda might be quietly color-coding different teach drivers through his face, it forces a brutal question. What if the real clues aren't in the teeth at all, but in which teach shows up for which scene? 3 skulls, 3 heads, 3... what exactly? If the teeth are one tile in the mosaic, then the Jolly Roger is the entire mural screaming at you in bold font. 3 skulls, 1 pair of crossbones. No other major pirate flag in the story does this. Every other Yonko, every big name, gets 1 head, 1 symbol, 1 identity. Teach alone plants 3 grinning faces on the same set of bones, and we need to stop pretending that's just Oda being quirky on a Tuesday. Visually, that flag is doing the same job as the Jaya scene. It's saying, this crew, this captain, is fundamentally plural. Not, he has a big crew, plural. Ontological plural. 3 skulls sharing a body the way 3 drivers share a single car. And once you start tracking that 3 across the Blackbeard pirates, you realize the flag isn't a cute logo. It's a mission statement the author stapled to the mast from day one. Teach has 3 core captains under him in the post-time skip era: Burgess, Shiryu and Lafitte as his main operational heads. He commands 3 major ships, each one effectively a different head of his expanding empire. The crew structure keeps clustering into trios, and fans didn't hallucinate this. The community keeps reaching for the same comparison. Cerberus, the 3-headed guard dog of the underworld. Guarding the gate, dragging souls down. Exactly the sort of myth Oda raids for breakfast. So the Cerberus zone theory basically writes itself. Teach ate, or will eat, a mythical Zoan model Cerberus, which explains the 3 skulls, the underworld theming, and why he can juggle multiple devil fruits without exploding. It's neat. It's elegant. It's the kind of theory that makes you feel very smart for 5 minutes. And yet, Oda has had absurd amounts of time and perfect opportunities to just confirm that. SBS questions, Vivre Card data, Zoan info dumps, nothing. Silence so loud it starts to count as data. Here's the thing. If the answer were, he has a Cerberus zone, that slots into a very normal category of One Piece powers. Mythical animal, weird ability, moving on. But everything around Teach is screaming that he's not a normal case study. So I need you to consider a nastier option. The 3 skulls aren't 3 heads he can grow. They're 3 wills that are already in there. 3 distinct identities. Potentially 3 separate D lineages or inherited wills fused into one atypical body that Marco explicitly flags as abnormal. That would turn Teach into a walking convergence of fates, a dark composite of failed or twisted Joy Boy candidates, rather than a guy with a cool dog fruit. This is not a sin. This is not overreading. This is exactly the sort of pre-writing move an author makes when they know the endgame. So you classify that flag as more than foreshadowing. It's pre-written iconography. The three-skull design is intentional. And when you stack it with Marco's line about his body, the never-sleeping detail, and the teeth, it heavily supports a multi-soul interpretation. And if the flag is the thesis statement, the real question is, where did those extra wheels come from in the first place? He never sleeps. Throwaway joke or soul-level red flag? So if the flag is the thesis statement, the next exhibit is way quieter, way easier to shrug off, and way more damning. I need you to remember that throwaway moment when Blackbeard's crew just offhandedly mentions, "Oh yeah, the captain, he never sleeps." No dramatic paneling, no ominous soundtrack. It's presented as this goofy fun fact, the same category as he snores loud or he eats a lot. Except here's the thing, in One Piece, everyone sleeps. Giants sleep. Sea Kings sleep. Luffy spends half his off-screen existence drooling on the Sunny's deck. Sleep is not a big thematic axis of this story. Oda is not Toriyama doing gags about Goku napping through fatherhood. So when an author this intentional stops the story to tag one character with a biologically impossible trait, you should feel your pattern-seeking monkey brain go, "Hold on, this is weird." Because it is weird. It's not just he's tough. It's not he can drink a lot. Never sleeps is a fundamental violation of how bodies work in this world. Even monsters crash. Even Zoro gets KO'd. When Oda singles Teach out, he's not adding flavor text. He's putting a neon highlighter over the body mystery and daring you to notice. Now, plug that into the multi-consciousness idea we've been building. If Teach is one guy, never sleeps is nonsense. If Teach is three wheels jammed into one chassis, suddenly you have a very clean, very mechanical explanation. The body never shuts down because the drivers take shifts. One soul pilots while the others rest. Then they rotate. From the outside, the organism is always awake. Internally, consciousness is clocking in and out. And before you accuse me of seeing Jesus in toast, we need to zoom out to how One Piece already treats souls. This is not new tech Oda would have to invent for Blackbeard. Brook's entire existence is, my body died, my soul did not, and it can free roam, possess things, and then plug back in. Big Mom casually rips lifespan out of people and turns it into independent homies with distinct personalities and fears. Thriller Bark runs on the idea that you can peel a shadow off someone, staple it into a corpse, and the resulting zombie inherits quirks, habits, even fighting styles. In other words, consciousness in this story is modular. It's detachable hardware, not a single welded unit. Never sleeps is not a cute pirate quirk. It's a soul-level red flag that slots perfectly into a pre-existing system. From a foreshadowing taxonomy perspective, this leans hard away from coincidence and toward genuine planned setup. There isn't an easier, cleaner alternative reading that explains why Oda bothered to script and preserve that line for decades. So you classify this not as retrofitting, not as fans coping, but as a very specific body mechanics clue. And once you accept that the consciousness situation is abnormal, the next question gets way scarier. Whose wills are actually riding around inside Marshall D. Teach in the first place? Blackbeard. As Luffy's dark mirror, Joy Boy's failed prototype. So if Teach is walking around with extra passengers in the brain department, we need to ask the uncomfortable question the community keeps dodging. Why is he so perfectly staged as Luffy's evil reflection from day one? Go back to Jaya. That scene in the bar is not just two weird guys yelling about pie, it's the author putting a mirror on the table. Luffy says the cherry pie is disgusting. Teach says it's amazing. Luffy loves the drink, Teach hates it. Total inversion. But then Teach slams the counter and drops, "People's dreams never end." Luffy walks out smiling. Teach laughs behind him. Same thesis on dreams. Opposite taste in everything else. That's not a gag. That's intentional character foreshadowing. And then you get the pronoun glitch. They're not dead yet. The anime quietly patches it. The manga keeps it weird. This is where I need you to slow down and actually respect how Oda does his writing. He doesn't waste a speech bubble on a grammatical error for 20 years. He's coding in the idea that this man is plural, while making him thematically parallel to the most singular, straightforward idiot in the story. Here's the thing. Once Wano spells out that Luffy is carrying Joy Boy's will, Jaya retroactively reads as a job interview. 2 candidates for the role of Dream King. One who embodies freedom through shared meals, found family, inherited promises. One who embodies freedom as unrestrained appetite and theft. Same obsession with the pirate age, same belief in an era of dreams, but completely different method and morality. Luffy frees slaves in Sabaody, Teach recruits slaves in Impel Down. Luffy dives into Marineford to save one brother. Teach dives in to loot one corpse. So when fans toss around Joy Boy as a vague prophecy category, they miss the darker, more planned implication. If there's a correct vessel for that will, there can be incorrect ones, failed prototypes, off-brand Joy Boys, and Teach is staged as the worst-case scenario of inherited will. The D, who heard the same song and decided to remix it into a war crime. Now plug the body horror back in. If Luffy gathers wills organically, Vivi's idealism, Odin's dream of open borders, Pedro's sacrifice, even Roger's laughter, Teach tries to brute force the same effect through his flesh. Multi-soul body, multiple devil fruits, triple-skulled Jolly Roger. Where Luffy lets other destinies live through him by consent, Teach hoards destinies by consumption. It's Joy Boy by way of corporate merger. This is not a sin. This is not bad writing. This is Oda taking the inherited will theme and running it through a meat grinder to prove a point. If Teach is meant to be the final audit of Joy Boy's legacy, his body cannot just be a random Cerberus gimmick the author slapped on because 3 heads look cool. It has to be structurally tied to will, freedom and fate, or the entire foreshadowing trail collapses into coincidence. So listen to me. If Teach is the dark mirror of inherited will, then whose wills are actually inside him? Are we dealing with 3 separate D carriers crammed into one chassis, or something even stranger? Failed Joy Boys, voided kings, discarded candidates. And if those souls wake up, who's really piloting the final villain when we hit Laugh Tale, Impel Down and Marineford? The puzzle pieces start clicking. So if Teach is a walking soul traffic jam, Impel Down is where Oda stops hinting and starts stress testing that chassis. Watch how he moves. He doesn't just randomly stumble into the world's worst prison because, haha, chaos. He cashes in the Shichibukai title, strolls through the front door, and weaponizes the world government's own failure storage. That level 6 recruitment drive? That's not a gag. That's him systematically stapling external power onto an internal anomaly. Here's the thing. Every decision in Impel Down reads different if you assume Teach already knows his body can survive what other humans can't. He tanks Magellan's poison, gets reduced to a twitching puddle, and still treats it as a minor setback. Any other character, that's a tragic cautionary tale. For Teach, it's Tuesday. The community hand-waves it as plot armor. But within the story's own rules, it's foreshadowing. It's the author quietly telling you, this creature's durability belongs in a different category. And I need you to notice how casual he is about risk. He starts a riot in the most secure prison on the planet, picks a fight with the warden, and then walks out with a party of endgame bosses he just met. No scouting, no loyalty checks, no concern that one of them might shank him in his sleep. Which, by the way, he famously doesn't do. The man who never sleeps is surrounding himself with predators and still feels safe. Why? Because if your body houses multiple souls, if your consciousness is already crowded, death is a negotiation, not a binary. Impel Down only makes sense as a prelude if you track it straight into Marineford. Those monsters from level 6 are not trophies. They're a mobile hazard suit. Teach knows he's about to attempt something under that tarp that is so dangerous, so metaphysically stupid, that even his abnormal body might fail if he's interrupted. So he builds a crew whose sole narrative job in that moment is to form a wall around the cocoon while he performs, whatever that theft mechanic actually is. Notice the choreography. He arrives late to Marineford, waits until Whitebeard is mortally wounded, then pounces. He doesn't experiment on some random Logia user. He goes straight for the man whose fruit is practically a natural disaster. That's confidence. That's pre-writing. The author has already decided this body can handle multiple devil fruits, so the test case is the most dangerous one available. And Oda will not show you how it works. We cut away. We see the tarp, we see the screams, we see the aftermath, and Marco's atypical body explanation, but the camera refuses to enter the black box. That's not coyness. That's structural. Teach is the only major villain whose core method is consistently hidden by paneling tricks. The story keeps saying, "This is important," while the art keeps saying, "You're not allowed to know yet." So listen to me. Impel Down and Marineford are the pivot from mysterious important guy to committed foreshadowing experiment. From this point on, Oda isn't just teasing darkness. He's demonstrating that this man's body plus this specific fruit equals a unique theft interface with souls and powers. And if that interface exists, we need to ask a much bigger question in the next section. What else can it steal besides devil fruits? Post-war world. How the story quietly crowns Blackbeard as the final boss. So once you realize Blackbeard's body is a custom-made theft engine, Marineford stops being his climax and turns into his origin story. Post-war is where Oda quietly hangs a giant neon sign over the series and goes, "By the way, this guy, this is the endgame." He just does it without ever saying the words final boss out loud. 2 years pass. The world reshuffles. And when we come back, who's wearing Whitebeard's crown? It's Teach. He's a Yonko now. He's annexed Whitebeard's territories. And in universe, he's the new face of pirate terror. People in the new world are telling horror stories about Blackbeard the way East Blue used to whisper about Arlong. That's not random escalation. That's the author promoting a side character into primary antagonist in the most efficient, planned way possible. Except here's the thing. For all that status, Oda barely shows him. We get newspaper headlines. We get Marco exposition about that guy with the atypical body. We get Burgess randomly trying to steal devil fruits at Dressrosa. But Blackbeard himself, he's mostly a rumor with a laugh track. And every time he does appear for 2 panels, the community goes feral over one weird tooth arrangement or one offhand "he never sleeps" line. This is not a sin. This is not fans being dumb. This is exactly how you treat a character whose secret is structurally important. You starve the audience so every crumb feels loaded. Now layer that on top of the D pivot. After the time skip, the story leans aggressively into Void Century, Joy Boy, Ancient Weapons, Inherited Will. We meet Corazon, we hear about the storm in the world, we get the Roger flashback, we see O'Hara's books on Elbaf. The Will of D stops being a quirky middle initial and becomes the spine of the mythology. And sitting right in that category is Marshall D. Teach, the only D whose body explicitly breaks the devil fruit rulebook. At that point, separating Blackbeard's weird biology from the core mystery of the series stops being possible. I need you to see the escalation here. Luffy's enemies keep scaling. Crocodile, Lucci, Doflamingo, Kaido. Each one is the strongest so far, but they're also thematic steps toward a final human wall. The cheerful dreamer D versus the joyless, hoarding D. The guy who frees slaves versus the guy who hunts powers. By the time Blackbeard is a Yonko, Oda has basically filed the paperwork. This is the last human antagonist Luffy has to beat before the story can resolve the Void Century itself, which retroactively weaponizes every hint. Jaya's they versus he speech, the triple skull Jolly Roger, the never sleeps comment, the teeth inconsistencies, Marco's atypical bodyline. None of these are cute trivia anymore. They're pieces of a pre-written answer Oda has been drip-feeding you for 20 plus years. And that shifts the question. We're no longer just asking, what is Blackbeard's secret? We need to ask, how has Oda been training us, emotionally and logically, to accept that secret the moment he finally says it out loud? Because in the next section, we're going to walk through exactly how he does that. Egghead, SBS, and cover stories. Oda's side channels for hiding answers. So here's where we need to zoom out from panels and start looking at channels. Because if you only read the weekly chapters and never touch an SBS, a cover story, or a databook, you are missing about a third of how Oda actually talks to you. Oda does multi-channel storytelling. Main chapters are the performance. SBS Q&A cover mini-arcs, and databooks are the director's commentary, the backstage tour, and the production Bible he occasionally lets you peek at. And listen to me, none of those are random. They're where he can clarify, bend or tease details without derailing the Straw Hat's POV. In the SBS especially, you see the mask slip. Fans ask a stupid Blackbeard question, Oda laughs, then drops one suspiciously precise detail about Teacher's age, or his design process, or some odd habit, and then goes, "Oh, I've said too much." That is not a meme. That is an author who already knows the answer and is stress testing how much he can reveal. He'll confirm that Teacher's weirdness is intentional, hint that certain parts of his body were drawn that way on purpose, then yank the curtain back down. This is where the community gets confused. We see an SBS line about Blackbeard's never sleeping, or a comment about his early concept art having different faces, and we go full pattern-seeking monkey who sees Jesus in toast. 3 souls, Cerberus, triplet brothers fused by a cursed fruit. Is that overboard? Sometimes yes. This is normal. This is fine. But the important part is the category. The question is not, did we guess correctly? The question is, why did Oda choose to say anything there at all? Then you have the cover art. Entire chapter covers where Blackbeard's flag gets a glamour shot. 3 skulls, 3 crossbones, shadows overlapping in 3s. Shots of his crew staged in subtle 3-part compositions, or with one member literally obscured in darkness, while 2 are clear. That is visual foreshadowing doing the same job the SBS does verbally. It keeps whispering, this guy is not a standard human template, without forcing a character to give a lecture. And now we hit Egghead, an arc obsessed with science, bodies, cloning, and devil fruit mechanics. An island where the narrative excuse is literally, here's a genius who has been documenting how souls and powers interact. I need you to see how perfect that is for Oda. He doesn't have to improvise a Blackbeard explanation later. He just has to route you through an arc that quietly normalizes the rules he already wrote down 20 years ago. Here's the thing. These side channels are where Oda pre-confirms. SBS answers, cover stories, databook entries, Egghead science lectures. They're not wild new ideas. They're controlled leaks of a solution he's already locked in. The story characters are still in the dark, but you're not supposed to be. Which raises the real problem. If all these channels are whispering the same answer about Blackbeard's body, then what exactly have they already told you, and how explicit does it get when you line them up? Sorting the evidence. What's actually foreshadowing versus fandom fanfic? So let's slow down for a second and actually sort this mess. Because right now, the Blackbeard discourse is a junk drawer. Everything's in there. Foreshadowing, retrofits, pure fan hallucinations. You reach in for a screwdriver and pull out a screenshot thread about his teeth. We need 4 buckets in our head. Bucket 1, strong foreshadowing. Bucket 2, deliberate pre-writing. Bucket 3, likely retrofits. Bucket 4, pure fandom pareidolia, where your brain is a pattern-seeking monkey seeing Jesus in toast. Bucket 1 first, because this is the spine of the argument. Strong foreshadowing is where the author is not just hinting, they are basically whispering the answer in your ear. High specificity, repeated, and later confirmed in story. Teach never sleeps. That's not a cute character quirk. In a world where souls literally wander around, where dreams and consciousness are textual mechanics, never sleeps is an alarm bell. Marco calling his body atypical at Marineford explicitly as the reason he can hold multiple fruits, that's not vibes, That is a direct causal statement. Body is weird implies fruit rule broken. That's foreshadowing. Bucket 2. Deliberate pre-writing. Here's the thing. This is still intentional, still planned, but it's more schematic than explicit. It's Oda sketching the outline of the secret before he nails the final wording. The Jolly Roger with 3 skulls. Jaya's they versus he speech, with Teach and Luffy hard contrasted on food, dreams and philosophy. Those are early fragments of a decision Oda has already made about multiple souls or identities, but they don't yet line up word for word with later exposition. They become strong foreshadowing only when Marco and the Never Sleeps line show up and snap them into focus. Bucket 3 is where I put the Drum Island attackers being retroactively identified as Blackbeard's crew. This is not a sin. This is normal. This is how serial storytelling works. You have a shadowy group trash a country. Then later you decide, oh, that was Teach. That ties him into Chopper's backstory. Great. It fits, it's elegant, but the original panels are generic enough that they don't meet the bar of high specificity. That's retrofitting, assigning sharper meaning to a previously blurry detail. And bucket 4, the one we need to talk about, is fandom overreach. Teeth discourse. I need you to hear me. Some of the teeth inconsistencies are probably intentional, but when people are zooming in on every missing molar across 20 years of art and declaring each one proof of 3 souls, we have lost the plot. This is not a sin. This is fine, but it's also not evidence. When every triangle, every triple object in a panel becomes a Cerberus clue while Never Sleeps gets one screenshot and a shrug, that's the problem. My criteria are simple. Specificity, repetition, and alignment with explicit later statements. The more those 3 stack, the higher the category climbs from pre-writing sketch to hard foreshadowing. And once you apply that filter, something very uncomfortable happens for theory culture. Oda has already told you the core of Blackbeard's secret. The body is abnormal. The soul situation is abnormal. The fruit rule is bent through that abnormality, not ignored. Everything else? The Jolly Roger, the Jaya dialogue, the teeth, the triangles, the sake cups, that's flavor. That's misdirection. That's Oda having fun while the answer sits in plain text. Which means the real question now is not what is Blackbeard, but how far has Oda already gone in spelling out the mechanics before he draws the final diagram. So, what is the secret? Building the multi-soul model. Step by step. So if all that stuff is flavor and misdirection, what's the actual mechanism? What is Oda quietly telling you Blackbeard's body is doing, in-universe, without pulling a random mythical Zoan out of a hat at the last second? We need to start by pinning the facts to the wall. Teach is a D. His body is explicitly called atypical by Marco, and that abnormality is the reason he can take more than one devil fruit. He can hold multiple fruits without instantly disintegrating. He never sleeps, according to his own crew. His Jolly Roger has 3 skulls, and his entire character is welded to the idea of inherited will and dreams that don't die. That's not vibes. That's a rule set. So here's the thing. The cleanest model is not weird organs or special blood. The cleanest model is metaphysical. 1 body, multiple souls, probably 3. In One Piece terms, that means multiple distinct wills inhabiting a single physical vessel. Normally, 1 soul, 1 fruit. The fruit rewrites the soul's relationship to reality. But if you have 3 separate souls in 1 chassis, each soul can bind to its own devil fruit without violating the 1 per soul rule. The author never has to break his own system. He just exploits a loophole he planted in Chapter 1 with the whole will obsession. Listen to me. This immediately cleans up Marineford's tarp scene. Under that curtain, Teach is not doing surgery. He's doing paperwork on the soul level. Yami absorbs, restrains and suppresses the Gura's devil as it's leaving Whitebeard's corpse. That's the darkness fruit's whole thing. It pulls in and nullifies powers. Then, instead of cramming that power onto the same soul that already holds Yami, he routes it to a second soul riding shotgun in his body. No rule broken. No contradiction. just an intentional exploitation of how devil fruits attach to consciousness. Now all the quirks stop being cute trivia and start reading as demonstrations. The never sleeps line? If you have 3 souls, you don't need to sleep at the same time. They take shifts. One rests while another pilots. The inconsistent teeth and facial structures that the community has been cataloguing for years. That's not Oda suddenly forgetting how to draw one of the most important villains in his career. That's subtle visual foreshadowing of different dominant personalities bubbling up. One grin is missing teeth, one is full, one is jagged. You're not seeing an error, you're seeing 3 residents. And the 3 skull flag stops being a Cerberus meme and becomes literal signage. This is a pirate crew whose captain is 3 distinct entities sharing one dream of reaching the top. I need you to notice what I'm not doing here. I'm not saying it's definitely a Cerberus Zoan or assigning a specific name, race or backstory to each soul. That's the pattern-seeking monkey brain seeing Jesus in toast. This is not a sin. This is normal. But it's not what Oda has actually confirmed. The only claim I'm making is structural. A multi-soul configuration is the only model that cleanly fits every strong on-page clue without special pleading, which then raises the real terrifying question. If Blackbeard is 3 wills in one body, where did those extra wills come from? And how far back did Oda plant their origin? Cerberus, mythology, and why Oda loves half-truths. So once you accept the 3 wills in one body model, you immediately run into the Cerberus theory, because of course you do. We are a community of pattern-seeking monkeys who see Jesus in toast. You give us 3 skulls on a Jolly Roger, and we're already Googling mythical 3-headed dog underworld edition. The popular version goes like this. Before the Yami Yami know me, Teach ate a mythical zone based on Cerberus. That fruit literally gave him 3 heads or 3 souls, which is why he can stack multiple devil fruits without exploding. The 3 skulls on his flag? Cerberus. The way his crew is structured around 3 core power blocks? Cerberus. The he versus they speech in Jaya, the never sleeping, the teeth changing? All filed under the same category. 3-headed hell dog man. Here's the thing. As a shorthand, this is actually clean. It takes the abstract, multi-soul configuration we just built and compresses it into one mythological reference an author can play with for visual foreshadowing. Cerberus guards the underworld. Teach is the guy dragging darkness and stolen souls around. 3 heads, 3 wills. It's elegant. It's memeable. It's something Oda could absolutely have planned as a surface-level reference to help fans talk about a much weirder internal reality. And this is not a sin. This is not bad theorizing. This is, in fact, how most readers survive long-form storytelling. You grab the nearest myth that fits and you staple it on so your brain can rest. But I need you to notice the gap. For every confirmed mythical zone in One Piece, Oda telegraphs the myth itself hard. Mako is called a phoenix on panel. Kaido is a dragon in story before we even see the full fruit explanation. Sengoku's Buddha is named. Yamato's deity is spelled out. When Oda wants you to think mythical zone, he does not mumble. With Teach, 0 explicit Cerberus references. No Hellhound, no Guardian of the Underworld, no gag panel of him with 3 dog heads. The 3 skull flag is strong foreshadowing for multiplicity, sure, but it is not proof of that specific fruit. The community has quietly upgraded a useful metaphor into a hard claim about his biology. And that's where the problem starts. So the compromise position is boring and therefore probably correct. Even if there is a Cerberus element, a fruit, an epithet, a cover story pun, it's almost certainly the costume, not the skeleton. Symbolic packaging for a deeper truth about how Teach's soul is partitioned, how inherited wills are colliding inside him, and why Mako calls his body atypical, without ever saying mythical Zoan. Listen to me. Oda loves doing this. He wraps a core thematic truth in flashy myth skin and lets everyone obsess over the costume. Sun God Nika isn't just rubber cartoon man. It's a mythology wrapper for freedom as a concept. Enel isn't just Raijin. He's a thunder god shell around the problem of authoritarian control. The myth is the handle. The theme is the blade. Which means if Cerberus is the handle on Blackbeard, we need to stop staring at the dog and start asking what weapon it's hiding. And there's one very specific, very old clue that blows this open. Whose wills are inside Blackbeard? The D question. And here's the thing. That very old clue is the letter on his name. Teach is a D. He shares that initial with Luffy, Law, Roger, Rox, Rouge, Dragon's Kid, the whole cursed middle name community that keeps getting dragged into conversations about inherited will and the Void Century. So whatever is wrong with Blackbeard's body, it's not just some random X-Men mutation Oda rolled on a Thursday. It is plugged directly into the core mystery of the story the author planned from day one. I need you to sit with that for a second. The guy whose body is so atypical he can host multiple devil fruits is also carrying the single most thematically loaded letter in the series. That's not two separate categories. That's the same problem wearing two different hats. So whose wills are we actually talking about? There are a few responsible options, and we need to separate them from the what if he's three goats in a trench coat tier of theory. Option 1. 3D bloodlines fused. Maybe through some Void Century experiment, maybe through generations of weird intermarriage in the Rox era, you end up with a human Cerberus. One body, three distinct D lineages, each with its own inherited will clawing for the wheel. Option 2. He is the experiment, not metaphorically. A literal relic of the ancient kingdom's research into souls, the same research that produced devil fruits and whatever the hell Imu is hoarding. In that frame, Teach is walking Void Century tech. The never sleeps detail becomes a design feature, not a fun pirate quirk. Constant consciousness because there are multiple consciousnesses. Option 3. This is a natural but astronomically rare D trait. The D are already framed as people whose wills echo across history. What if, once in an era, that echo doesn't wait for reincarnation? It stacks. Instead of will to death to new D, you get will to will to will in one unlucky body. And that's Teach. Now, pattern interrupt, because this is where it gets uncomfortable. What if one of those wills is Joy Boy adjacent? Not Joy Boy himself in a cheap reincarnation twist, but a rival from that era. A failed Joy Boy. A dark mirror candidate for the same world-changing D role Luffy has inherited. Suddenly, Blackbeard isn't just Luffy's opposite in storytelling color theory. He's competing for the same cosmic job opening. Listen to me, that fits the writing. Luffy hears Nika and frees people. Teach hears darkness and chains them. Luffy's body turns into rubber joy. Teach's body turns into a gravity well that eats everything, even pain. If Luffy is Joy Boy's will fulfilled, Teach is Joy Boy's antithesis, proof that a D can break bad on a cosmic scale, and Oda is not, in a million years, revealing some unrelated alien parasite origin for this. This is not a sin to say. It's just basic narrative logic. The multi-soul structure, the Cerberus foreshadowing, the D initial, the Void Century research, they're all pieces of the same planned puzzle. The exact identities, still speculation. This is fine. This is normal. We're pattern-seeking monkeys staring at toast here until Oda flips the final law switch. But if Teach is a D Cerberus, then the next question is brutal. How many heads does the endgame actually need? Why Oda hid the answer in theme, not in a single exposition dump? So here's the thing. If Oda ever drops a single panel where Vegapunk turns to the camera and goes, "Ah yes, Blackbeard's three souls work as follows," I'm walking into the ocean. That's not how this author operates. That's not how this story has ever handled its biggest systems. And if you've been paying attention, you already know that. Oda hates dry exposition. He'll use it when he has to, sure, but notice the pattern. Haki is demonstrated through Zoro's breath of all things, through Enel's mantra, through Rayleigh casually flexing in a bar, long before we get the Rayleigh lecture. Gear 5 isn't introduced in a PowerPoint. It's a rubber cartoon meltdown that you feel before you understand. The writing philosophy is clear. Mechanics are revealed through action, metaphor, and character interaction first. Explanation, if it ever comes, is cleanup, not the main dish. Blackbeard is the purest version of that approach. His body isn't just a plot mechanic. It's where half the themes of One Piece go to live. Inherited will. He's a D who weaponizes dreams instead of liberating them. People's dreams never end isn't just a cool Jaya line. It's a mission statement for a guy hoarding other people's destinies in his flesh. Darkness versus light. Luffy's sun god fruit literally turns him into joy incarnate. Teaches Yami sucks in everything, even the intangible. The cost of chasing power. Luffy stretches himself to save others. Teach tears his own body apart to cram in more stolen miracles. If Oda just had someone say, "Oh, he has 3 souls, that's why," it collapses all of that into a magic trick. Ta-da! The rabbit was in the hat the whole time. Clap and go home. That's not foreshadowing, that's trivia. Oda wants you to reach the reveal and feel that horrible, wonderful retrospective click. Of course, the guy with 3 skulls on his flag, the man who never sleeps, the they in Jaya, the inconsistent teeth, was built for multiple devil fruits. Of course, the Cerberus imagery wasn't an accident. The answer shouldn't surprise you, it should humiliate you. Listen to me. This is the same structural play he ran with Gear 5 and the Gomu Gomu. For years, we watched Luffy's fruit behave wrong. Too versatile, too central, too thematically loaded. Sun motifs in Scipia, drums of liberation, Nika silhouettes, the whole community screaming coincidence or retrofit. Then Wano hits, the word Nika drops, and suddenly those panels weren't random. They were pre-written fragments finally being labelled. Teachers getting the same treatment, just slower and darker. Every appearance is another shard of a decision Oda made decades ago. Which means, if you've followed the argument so far, you're already ahead of where a lot of fans will be when the story finally spells out the model. This is not a sin. This is normal. We need to accept that the explanation is already on the page. We're just waiting for the story to admit it out loud. And once you accept that, the next step is brutal. What does that actually mean for the endgame matchup between the Sun God and the Man of 3 Shadows? Rewriting. The timeline. When did Oda decide Blackbeard's true nature? So if Blackbeard is the Man of 3 Shadows standing across from the Sun God, the obvious question is, when did Oda actually decide that? Not when fans noticed, when the author locked it in on his outline. Because if we're going to separate foreshadowing from retrofitting and pre-writing, we need to timestamp the decision. Go back to Jaya. I need you to really sit with that rooftop scene. Luffy and Zoro brush past Teach, and Oda does that weird he/they gag. One translation treats Blackbeard as plural. Then they hard contrast food preferences and dreams. People's dreams never end. That is not random Pirate of the Week dialogue. That is Oda staking out Teach as Luffy's dark mirror, as another D whose dream points in the opposite direction. At this point, I don't think the multi-soul body mechanic is fully specced out, but the role, the category of character he is. That's pre-written. Jaya is Oda saying, this guy is endgame, this guy is the anti-Luffy, and I'll figure out the anatomy details on the road. Here's the thing. Once you hit Marineford, the vagueness disappears. The tarp scene where Blackbeard steals Whitebeard's fruit is the point of no return. Oda has him literally cover the body, cut away, and then emerge with a second devil fruit. No handwave, no special Yami power explanation. Then, later, Marco drops the line. Teacher's body is atypical. That's why he can do this. That is Oda committing, in print, to a body-based explanation. Not plot armor, not pure darkness magic. A physical, biological, probably soul-related anomaly. From a foreshadowing standpoint, Marineford is where the author stops flirting and puts a ring on the multi-soul concept. So what happens between Ace versus Teach and Marineford? This is where the refinements live. The Ace fight shows the Yami fruit's absorption and pain mechanics. Impel Down shows Blackbeard recruiting, talking about fate, and explicitly tying his rise to the era of dreams. Somewhere in there, Oda has to solve 3 problems on his storyboard. How does the darkness fruit interact with a soul? How does devil fruit theft work without breaking his own system? And how do you anchor all of that in Teacher's Never Sleeps, Three-Skull Jolly Roger, and inconsistent teeth without turning him into a walking PowerPoint slide? That middle period screams intense behind-the-scenes writing. And this is not a sin. This is normal. Weekly manga is a meat grinder. You pre-write the big stuff. Endgame rivals, core mysteries, the fact that your villain is literally a 3-part consciousness. And then you retrofit small details and lock specifics when the story demands them. Fans imagining Oda with a 1,000-page Blackbeard anatomy Bible in 1997 are just being the pattern-seeking monkey who sees Jesus in toast. So if Jaya is the role decision and Marineford is the body decision, where does the true nature get finalized? I'd put it somewhere between late pre-time skip and early post-time skip. The never sleeps line, the 3-skull flag, the psych imagery, the teeth shifts. Early arcs become flexible pre-writing, raw material he can later sculpt into precise foreshadowing once he's ready to spell out the multi-soul model. The text is already obeying rules we don't fully know yet, which raises the uncomfortable, delicious question. If Blackbeard's framework was locked in that early, what other unsolved mysteries are already secretly fixed in Oda's notebook, just waiting for us to catch up? Fans versus Oda. How mislabeling everything as foreshadowing warps the discourse. And here's where our little pattern-seeking monkey really starts flinging bananas at the ceiling. Because once you know Oda has a pre-written endgame, the temptation is to turn into the guy who screenshots 2 random panels 10 years apart and goes, foreshadowing, confirmed. I need you to recognize how strong that drug is. There is social clout in being the person who noticed it first, so suddenly every shadow, every weird face, every background extra becomes a secret Blackbeard clue in someone's Twitter thread. This is not a sin. This is normal. The problem is what happens when the community stops drawing any category lines. When a carefully planned setup and a funny panel coincidence both get stamped with the same big foreshadowing label, the word stops meaning anything. Marco's "Teach's body is atypical" line should not be in the same bucket as "his teeth look different in this spread, therefore Cerberus." Those are not the same tier of intentional writing. Here's the thing. When you call both of those Oda 4D chess, you actually erase a different kind of skill. You erase the craft of adaptive storytelling. Oda absolutely pre-writes huge chunks, but he's also revising, reframing, and retrofitting under deadline. The man is not a prophecy machine. He is a working author who can take an old, vague seed and sculpt it into a razor-sharp payoff because he understands his own story's physics. If you treat everything as perfectly planned foreshadowing, you miss how impressive it is that he can change course without snapping the spine of the narrative. You stop asking, what did he know, and start worshipping, he knew everything. Which is not only wrong, it's boring. Pattern interrupt. Teeth memes. Listen to me. The fandom will write dissertations on Blackbeard's dental records. Panel A, missing tooth. Panel B, full set. Therefore, 3 beings in one body. Meanwhile, the same people will hand-wave the much stronger textual clues. The he versus they speech in Jaya, the explicit never sleeps detail, the 3-skull Jolly Roger, the way his dream speech mirrors and distorts Luffy's. We trade solid, intentional signals for the thrill of seeing Jesus in toast. And when you overcredit omniscient planning, you also undercredit thematic design. Teacher's the dark mirror of Luffy, the corrupted will of D, the man who weaponizes inherited dreams instead of embodying them. That is not a teeth gag. That is Oda using pre-writing, foreshadowing, and retrofitting together to build a villain who feels inevitable. So we need to start using cleaner language. Foreshadowing for the deliberate setups, retrofitting for the clever reuses, pre-writing for the big frozen pillars he decided before Chapter 1. Once you respect the difference, Oda stops being a flawless god and becomes something more impressive. A master craftsman operating under weekly pressure, who still manages to make Blackbeard's mystery feel both surprising and, in hindsight, absolutely planned. And if we can separate those categories in theory, then we can finally go back to the text and ask a better question. Which Blackbeard clues belong to which bucket? Why it matters that Blackbeard's secret is already solved. So here's where a lot of the community quietly panics. If we say Blackbeard is already solved, doesn't that kill the fun? Doesn't that mean Oda's big mystery villain is a spreadsheet problem we finished early? I need you to sit with that anxiety for a second, because it tells you more about your expectations than about the writing. First, we need to define what solved actually means here. It does not mean we know the exact Vegapunk PowerPoint slide of how many souls per square inch are in Teach's torso. It means the broad shape is locked in by the text. Multi-soul or multi-aspect body. That abnormality enabling multiple devil fruits. All of it framed through the D and inherited will. Marco literally says his body is atypical. The crew says he never sleeps. The Jolly Roger has 3 skulls. This is not vibes. This is not a pattern-seeking monkey seeing Jesus in toast. This is a category of foreshadowing where the author has already given you the answer, just not the manual. Once you accept that, Blackbeard scenes stop being roulette and start being slow confirmation. And that is a good thing. From Jaya's they versus he speech, to the food preference flip with Luffy, to the teeth changing between panels, Oda has been writing to a model. When Teach grabs Whitebeard's fruit, you're not supposed to think, wow, random power-up. You're supposed to think, oh, this is the payoff to that creepy never sleeps 3 skulls weird body drumbeat. Future arcs then become about emotional weight. How does a man built out of stolen dreams confront the guy whose whole ethos is people's dreams never end? Here's the thing. If you refuse that model and keep chasing a 4th fruit, a secret moon race, a hidden zone that turns him into a refrigerator, you are setting yourself up for disappointment. This is not a sin. This is normal fandom behavior. But Oda is not writing a YouTube twist compilation. He's writing a thematically tight confrontation between 2 versions of the D legacy. When the reveal lands, and it's only 3 souls, 3 wills, 3 inherited obsessions stapled into one body, a lot of fans are going to say, that's it? And the answer will be, yes, that's it. That's what he's been telling you since Drum. If you accept that now, your hype shifts into a much healthier direction. Instead of asking, what is Blackbeard? You start asking, how is Luffy going to break that? How does Nika, the embodiment of liberated joy and shared will, clash with a man who hoards wills, hoards fruits, hoards eras? What does it mean narratively for the worst possible D to lose to the best possible D? Those are endgame questions. Those are the questions Oda actually planned. And listen to me. Recognizing that the answer was built quietly over decades should make you respect him more, not less. If the final reveal feels obvious in hindsight, that's the point. That's pre-writing working. The gun was always on the mantle. We're just waiting to watch it fire. Because the real mystery isn't the body anymore. It's what that body is going to do to the world when it finally collides with Joy Boy's heir, and what the world does after it's gone. From Jaya to Egghead, a rapid-fire recap of every key Blackbeard clue. So let's zoom out for a second, because I need you to actually feel how absurd this stack of evidence is. We didn't just wake up one day as a community and go, 3 skulls must be 3 souls. Oda walked us there, island by island, for 20 years. We start in Jaya. First meeting. Luffy and Teach pass each other in the street, and Oda runs a full diagnostic in 1 page. The food reversal gag. Luffy hates cherry pie, Teach loves it. Luffy loves the drink, Teach spits it out. Opposite taste buds as a shorthand for opposite dreams. Then that they speech. The crew calls Blackbeard he, but Teach fires back with people's dreams never end, and the narration frames him as a plural. The paneling literally dark mirrors Luffy at the bar. On its own, cute character writing, in context. Opening statement for, this man is Joy Boy's negative. Jump to drum. Wapol runs from a mysterious pirate who obliterates a kingdom off-screen. Years later, that smoking crater is casually stapled to Blackbeard's rap sheet. At the same time, Ace vs. Teach gives us the Yami Yami demo reel, a fruit that doesn't just control darkness, it absorbs. It drags in fire, bodies, even devil fruit abilities, and amplifies pain instead of negating it. And Teach won't shut up about fate. He's not just strong. He's a guy who believes the universe already handed him a script. Marineford and the post-war cleanup are where Oda rips the subtlety throttle off. Blackbeard steals Whitebeard's fruit under a tarp, emerges with 2 powers, and every character on the battlefield goes, "That should be impossible." Marco steps in as the author's mouthpiece and says the quiet part out loud. Teach has an atypical body, not special haki, not a loophole, a body, biological foreshadowing. Then, in the time skip, this same weirdo is suddenly a Yonko, narratively parked in the exact spot you reserve for the final boss. Stack the oddities. He never sleeps, which in One Piece is not just quirky insomnia, it's a soul problem. His Jolly Roger has 3 skulls. His teeth change configuration between arcs and sometimes between panels, which is not how a perfectionist author accidentally draws. His crew is weirdly 3-themed. 3 main ships, 3 key commanders, a whole Cerberus-adjacent vibe. And Oda keeps drowning him in shadow, cropping his face, staging him as a silhouette where everyone else gets clear line art. This is not a sin. This is not bad continuity. This is intentional visual writing. Here's the thing. Any one of those details could be nothing. A design tweak, a translation quirk, a pattern-seeking monkey moment where we see Jesus in toast and call it theory. This is normal. This is fine. But when you put Jaya's plural dreams next to Drum's Vanish Country, next to the Yami Yami's absorption rules, next to Marco's atypical body, next to the 3 skull flag and the never sleeps line, the category changes. We are no longer in coincidence territory. We are in pre-written endgame. All of it converges on one answer. Oda planned a multi-soul, multi-fruit body from the start and has been quietly screaming it at us in slow motion. The only real question now isn't, does Teach have more than one self in there? It's how far Oda is willing to push that idea when those selves start arguing on the page, and who, exactly, they used to be. Oda's real superpower, flexible planning, not 25-year mind reading. And here's where I need you to throw away one of the most persistent One Piece myths. The idea that Oda has every single panel planned from Chapter 1 carved into a stone tablet in his basement. No, he doesn't. He has a spine. He has organs. The exact shape of the fingers? Those evolve. And Blackbeard is the perfect X-ray of how that actually works. Think about Teach's timeline. In Jaya, he's a weirdo on a barrel ranting about dreams, arguing with Luffy through that he versus they translation quirk, mirroring Luffy's food tastes in reverse. That's not random. That's early pre-writing. Oda already knows. This guy is the dark Luffy, the corrupted D, the body with something wrong in it. But is every detail of the multi-fruit gimmick locked there? No. What's locked is the category. Abnormal body, multiple selves, endgame rival. Then we sharpen. Ace versus Teach. Suddenly, the Yami Yami no Mi appears. We see how violently it drags things in, how it cancels devil fruits. Now, the never sleeps line from his crew starts to look less quirky and more medical. By Marineford, Oda commits hard. Teach steals Whitebeard's fruit in a way that makes no sense under the old rules. Marco literally calls his body atypical as the explanation. That is the author planting a flag in public. No more wiggle room. This man's biology is the rule breaker. After that, reinforcement, teeth changing between arcs, the 3-skull Jolly Roger, the sack cup imagery, echoing Luffy and Shanks, but twisted. Later, world building about souls, shadows, and wills during Thriller Bark, Punk Hazard, Whole Cake, Wano. All of it quietly builds a vocabulary that can justify whatever Oda finally reveals about Teach's internal tenets. This is not a sin. This is not sloppy. This is Oda retrofitting around a pre-written core. Here's the thing, that flexibility is the superpower. Because he didn't lock every micro detail in 1997, he could scale Blackbeard up after Marineford's success, after he realized the time skip worked, after Joy Boy and Nika and the broader D mythology crystallized. He can tune Teach to be the anti-Joy Boy, the man who hoards inherited wills instead of freeing them, because the slot was planned even if the exact phrasing arrived later. Pattern interrupt. A lot of long manga do the opposite. They etch an early prophecy, marry a twist too soon, and then spend 10 years trapped by their own foreshadowing, dragging a corpse of an idea across the finish line. You've read those series where the final villain feels dated, where the big reveal clearly belongs to an earlier, worse draft. That's the problem with rigid planning. Oda's modular approach, pre-written backbone, flexible limbs, keeps One Piece feeling alive. Blackbeard isn't proof that Oda is a 25-year mind reader. He's proof that Oda is a ruthless editor of his own long-term plan. And once you see that, you're not just reacting to twists anymore. You're reading process. You're watching where he hard commits, where he leaves himself escape hatches, where a gag panel is actually a future surgery site. Listen to me. We need to start tracking those moments because the next wave of impossible reveals, they're already sitting there, waiting for Oda to decide how sharp he wants them to cut. How to stop getting baited by fake foreshadowing online. So how do you not get farmed for content every time a new Blackbeard panel drops on Twitter? Because the bait is only going to get worse from here. Every cloud, every background skull, every weird tooth shot is going to be Oda just revealed Teach's third soul with a crying emoji and 200,000 likes. Here's the thing. You need a dumb, simple test. Not galaxy brain, not PhD in narratology. Just ask, is this detail repeated, emphasized in dialogue, or structurally important? Say it out loud. If the answer is no, it's probably not major foreshadowing. A one-off weird tooth in a chaotic fight spread. Probably nothing. Marco stopping mid-war to say, his body is atypical. That's the author grabbing you by the collar. Repetition is Oda's highlighter. Emphasis in dialogue is his siren. Structural importance is when the whole scene is built to deliver that one line or visual. Blackbeard's people's dreams never end speech on Jaya? That's a structural pillar. The panel of him not sleeping that his own crew comments on, that's emphasized. A random background barrel with 3 rings on it in Egghead? Calm down, pattern-seeking monkey who sees Jesus in toast. This is normal. Second heuristic, category check. I need you to start asking, every time you see a new Teach panel, given where we are in the story, is this more likely pre-writing, retrofitting, or genuine foreshadowing? Early Jaya Teach, the they versus he speech, the food preference inversion with Luffy, the triple skull Jolly Roger, that's pre-writing surfacing. That's core gimmick, baked in from day 0. Marineford Marco going, his body is weird, that's explicit foreshadowing of the two-fruit mystery. A random SBS doodle from 2023 that happens to echo a fan theory from 2010. Much higher odds that's playful retrofit. And we need to talk about screenshot bait. Out-of-context panels on social media are engineered to exaggerate significance. That's the whole game. You crop out the surrounding dialogue, you slap Oda Bin cooking on it, and boom, instant engagement. Whenever you see one of those, your first reflex should be, go back to the full chapter. How does Oda frame the moment? Is it isolated, zoomed in, given silent beats? Or is it just one chaotic tile in a busy action mosaic? The difference matters. Also, you don't have to solve everything. You don't need a take on every tooth arrangement, every sake cup, every cloud swirl. This is not a sin. This is fine. Appreciating the storytelling does not require you to front-run the author on every micro symbol. Sometimes the most honest response is, weird. I'll bookmark that in my brain and move on. So, applied to Blackbeard going forward, stop hunting in random background objects and start listening to how the story talks around him. The real clues are going to be in conversations about souls, inherited will, and the D-clan that happen in his orbit. When Vegapunk explains what a soul even is, when someone contrasts Luffy's one blazing will with Teach's never sleeps abnormality, that's where the real surgery is happening. And if you train your eye for that, the next time Oda drops a throwaway Teach scene, you're going to feel the floor shift under your feet before the community even agrees it was important. What Blackbeard's defeat has to look like, if this model is right. So if Teach really is a walking roommate situation, then his final loss cannot just be Luffy punches harder this week. That's not a climax, that's a patch note. If Oda has been quietly telling you for 20 years that this man is a bundle of stolen wills, then the defeat has to answer the question the foreshadowing actually raised. What happens to those wills when the vessel breaks? Here's the thing. The story has already told you that souls in One Piece are mobile, quantifiable objects. Brook's whole existence, Big Mom ripping lifespans out of people, Vegapunk literally explaining the soul in Egghead. So when Marco says Teach's body is atypical, when the crew says he never sleeps, that's not just flavor text. That is the author pre-writing a rules problem. You cannot resolve that with a single King Kong gun and a victory pose. I need you to imagine the final Teach fight not as one knockout, but as 3 trials. If his Jolly Roger's triple skulls, the tooth inconsistencies, the Jaya, they speech all point to multiple souls, then narratively you have options. Maybe each soul peels off when he's pushed to the brink. Maybe one is the original cowardly Teach, one is the ambitious pirate, one is the pure hunger for devil fruits. You could have one beg for release, one cling to power, one try to bargain with Luffy in real time. Tell me that wouldn't be the most Oda thing in the world. And this is where Inherited will walks in with a sledgehammer. Luffy's whole deal is that he carries other people's dreams by freeing them, by letting them chase those dreams on their own terms. Blackbeard's whole deal is hoarding. He doesn't inherit will, he warehouses it. He treats souls, fruits, and dreams as collectibles. So the difference in the final clash can't just be my haki is stronger. It has to be that Luffy's single, blazing will overwhelms a committee of stolen ones because his way of living has generated genuine allegiance, not parasitic accumulation. Now, devil fruits. If each soul in Teach is bound to a fruit, what happens when he dies? Do we get a slot machine of reincarnating fruits popping around the globe? Does one core soul hang on and drag a single fruit with it? This is where Oda can quietly resolve the entire devil fruit system. You have a character who is literally a test case for what if one body breaks the rule. Killing him on screen is the perfect excuse to show, step by step, how fruits leave bodies, how wills attach, whether the Nika fruit is an exception or the template. And if you're hearing this and thinking, isn't that too complicated for a shonen climax? This is not a sin. This is normal for this author. We need to remember he turned a goofy whale gag into a 50-year tragedy payoff. A multi-soul defeat is not overkill. It's the only way to cash in decades of planned weirdness. The real question is, whose will actually gets the last word when Teach falls? And that's where the model gets terrifying. Comparing Blackbeard to other body weirdos in One Piece. And that's where the model gets terrifying. Because once you say multi-soul defeat, you run into a problem the community always runs into with Blackbeard. Isn't that too out there? Isn't that breaking the rules? Listen to me. Oda has been stress testing the body/soul rules for 25 years. Teach is not the exception. He's the final exam. Think about Brook. The man is literally a walking punchline for the first half of his existence. Skeleton musician, skull jokes, pervert grandpa energy. But his entire gimmick is a soul that re-enters a dead body and keeps it moving. The author is telling you, very calmly, that in this world, soul is a mobile, independent resource. It can leave. It can come back. It can get lost on the way. That's not a gag. That's a rule of the setting. Now jump to Big Mum. Her Soru. Soru no Mi is just Oda ripping the mask off that rule. She rips lifespan out of people, stuffs it into homies, animates furniture, weather, Napoleon's hat sword. Souls are currency. Souls are building blocks. She is a walking thesis statement that body and soul are separable systems you can mod, tax, and redistribute. And the story treats that as horrifying, sure, but also as mechanically normal. This is fine. Then you have Moria. Shadows as stand-ins for souls. Swap a shadow, change a body's fighting style. Cram 100 shadows into one corpse and you get Nightmare Luffy. That is literally a prototype for composite will entity. Multiple essences. One chassis. You watch that arc now and it reads as a lab experiment for what Teach is doing at endgame scale. And it's not just the supernatural weirdos. Kuma is a walking government patch note. Pacifista, cybernetics, memories sliced out and stored. His body is one category, his mind and will another. And Vegapunk edits both in different ways. Sanji's germa biology, same conversation. His exoskeleton awakens, his emotions are threatened, his humanity becomes a toggleable setting. We need to stop pretending Oda hasn't been screaming software versus hardware in shonen cosplay for decades. Here's the thing. All of these characters are doing thematic labor. Brook is memory and promise. Big Mom is hunger and stolen childhood. Moria is grief curdled into laziness. Kuma is sacrifice. Sanji is identity under genetic pressure. None of this is random cool power generator writing. It's intentional. And every time the story separates body from soul, it ties that separation to a very specific wound. So where does that leave Teach? He is hoarded will. He is ambition that refuses to stay inside one lifetime, one body, one devil fruit. If Brook is a soul that won't give up, and Kuma is a body that keeps obeying after the man is gone, Blackbeard is a void that keeps demanding more souls to fill it. That tracks across every prior experiment. He's not a new category, he's the apex configuration. Pattern interrupt. What if the real foreshadowing for Blackbeard wasn't any panel of Blackbeard at all, but the cumulative weight of every other body weirdo Oda wrote first? If you see Teach in that lineage, his atypical body stops being plot armor and starts being the inevitable final boss of the rules you already accepted. Which then raises a much nastier question. If Oda has been escalating this system on purpose, what does he need Luffy's soul to do at the very end to beat a man made of stolen wills? The last missing piece. How many fruits will Blackbeard end up with? So we've circled the drain on what Luffy's soul has to become. Now we need to ask the equally stupid, equally terrifying mirror question. How many souls worth of sin is Oda actually going to stuff into Blackbeard by the end? Right now, canonically, Teach is already breaking the game. Darkness fruit. Quake fruit. 2 devil fruits. 0 spontaneous combustion. Marco explicitly waving his hands and going, yeah, his body is just built different. That's not a gag. That's the author stapling a big neon sign to this man's biology and then refusing to explain it for 15 years. And because Oda drew 3 skulls on his Jolly Roger, the community did what the community always does. We stared at it, we squinted, and we turned into that pattern-seeking monkey who sees Jesus in toast. 3 skulls, 3 souls, 3 fruits. This is not a sin. This is normal. You see a stable visual motif, you assume it's intentional foreshadowing of a clean one-to-one payoff. On paper, 3 fruits is ridiculously tidy. 1 soul, 1 fruit, 3 souls, 3 fruits. Darkness as the void, quakes as the world breaker, then some final third power that turns him into the literal anti-Joy Boy. The Cerberus body gets a Cerberus loadout. From a pure writing perspective, that symmetry is so planned, it almost feels too easy, right? But here's the thing. Every time you give a character another system-breaking toy, you're not just raising the power ceiling, you're raising the homework. A 3rd fruit doesn't just mean Teach is stronger now. It means Oda has to choreograph endgame fights around 3 separate abilities, 3 separate counters, and Luffy has to answer all of them without the battle turning into a PowerPoint presentation. That's the problem. So I need you to consider a different category for that hypothetical 3rd slot. Not more tactics, but more symbol. If each soul can host one fruit, 3 really does feel like the logical cap. Any more and you're not paying off the 3-soul model. You're contradicting it, or you're suddenly inventing a 4th ghost in his ribcage in chapter 1200. Even Oda's chaos has rules, which is why there's a very real chance the final escalation isn't Teach eats fruit number 3, but Teach plugs soul number 3 into something older. An ancient weapon. Uranus-adjacent sky nuke. Or even worse, a direct line to whatever Joy Boy's rival Will was during the Void Century. The 3rd power might not be a fruit at all. It might be the operating system his 3 souls are running. And if that's true, then the 3-skull Jolly Roger stops being a grocery list of future powers and starts being a warning label. Because listen to me, Oda has already tested this exact move on a smaller scale. The question is, which earlier mystery power he quietly used as the rehearsal? If you still think it's just a theory, you weren't listening. Here's the thing. If you're still filing this under fun headcanon after everything Oda has handed you, you're not engaging with the actual record. We need to zoom out and look at the hard, on-page, repeatedly underlined facts, not just the one panel that fits your favorite YouTube thumbnail. Marco spells it out at Marineford, not metaphorically. He literally says, Teach's body is atypical, and that's why he can handle multiple devil fruits. That's not vibes. That's the author putting a causality arrow between weird body and 2 fruits in big neon letters. Then you stack on the impel down tarp theft, where he explicitly goes in with 1 power and walks out with 2 after covering Whitebeard's corpse so we cannot see what he's doing. That is surgical, intentional framing. That is foreshadowing with the training wheels off. Add in the never sleeps line from his crew. In a world where souls, dreams, and literal ghosts are established mechanics, a guy who never sleeps is not just a fun pirate quirk. That's a soul distribution problem. That's an OS bug. Then you've got the 3-skull Jolly Roger, the multi-fruit reality, and the fact that this man carries the D and is very obviously being positioned as Luffy's dark mirror in the final act. You don't give the thematic antithesis of your sun god protagonist a random biology glitch. You plan that. Now contrast that with the counterpoints I see the community throw around. Well, Oda hasn't said it outright. Correct. That's what a reveal is. The author not printing the answer key on the margin of chapter 500 is not evidence against intentional setup. Or the classic, it could just be a Cerberus Zoan. Sure, it could. This is not a sin. Speculating in categories is normal, but that explanation only half addresses the problem. Cerberus doesn't explain Marco's atypical body line, the never sleeping, the Jaya personality dissonance, the teeth inconsistencies, the tarp, and the 3-skull flag all at once. Listen to me. 1 or 2 coincidences, you can hand-wave. A weird Jolly Roger here, a strange line about sleep there. This is fine. This is normal. But when you have over a dozen visual and textual breadcrumbs spread across decades, all converging on, this man is running multiple souls in one chassis, you are not in coincidence country anymore. You are in authorial intent territory. Pattern interrupt. If you honestly think this is just a theory, then I need you to do homework. Not because I'm your teacher, but because if you're going to reject the multi-soul model, you owe yourself an alternative that does the same job. Can your explanation account for Marco's statement, the tarp, the never sleeping, the 3-skull flag, the multi-fruit reality, the D symbolism, and the Luffy parallel, without hand-waving any of them as Oda trolling? If it can, I genuinely want to hear it. If it can't, then what we're protecting isn't evidence. It's the comforting illusion that Blackbeard is still a blank box. And that's the real problem, because in the next section, I'm going to show you the earlier mystery power where Oda already ran this exact playbook, and then publicly admitted it. Zooming out. What Blackbeard teaches us about reading long stories. And that's exactly why we need to zoom out for a second. Because this isn't just about Blackbeard having a weird body, or Oda being caught on a hot mic admitting he had a plan. This is about how you and I read long stories in the first place. I need you to stop treating a 25-year serialized manga like a solved crossword puzzle and start treating it like what it actually is, a living organism. Living organisms grow. They adapt. Sometimes they mutate in ways the original blueprint did not fully anticipate. This is not a sin. This is fine. This is normal. In long-form storytelling, the plan is the DNA. But the weekly grind, the editor meetings, the changing tastes of the community, that's the environment. The story evolves under pressure. If it doesn't, it dies. Blackbeard is the cleanest case study of that evolution. Go back to Jaya, the they versus he speech, the food preference reversal with Luffy, the drunk in the street ranting about dreams. That's pure pre-writing. That's Oda putting the gun on the mantle because he's already written the shooting. Then jump to Marineford, where Marco explicitly calls Teach's body atypical to justify 2 devil fruits. That's the commitment phase. The manga is saying out loud what the Jaya scene only whispered. In between those points, you can watch Oda's needs and inspirations shifting in real time. The never sleeps line, the 3-skull Jolly Roger, the teeth-changing panels like a glitching model in a PS2 cutscene. Are all of those details part of a perfectly architected day one document? Probably not. Some are pre-written anchors, some are retrofits, some are him riffing because the Blackbeard idea kept getting richer. But when you track them across arcs, they still feel cohesive. Here's the thing. Once you start seeing that process, reading gets way more fun. Instead of asking, was this foreshadowed from chapter 1, yes or no? You start asking, is this pre-writing? Is this retrofit? Or is this a happy accident Oda later weaponized? You're not just consuming the story, you're reverse engineering the writing. You're appreciating the intentional spine and the improvisational muscles wrapped around it. And we need to talk about purity tests, because they're killing people's ability to enjoy this stuff. The demand that every reveal must be encoded in Chapter 1 in perfect detail is a childish standard. It's a Marvel fan scanning the first movie frame by frame for the exact timestamp where Thanos' tax attorney was foreshadowed. It flattens storytelling into a scavenger hunt and punishes any spontaneity as inconsistent. One Piece is the antidote to that mindset. If you can look at Blackbeard, at Jaya, Drum, Impel Down, Marineford, Egghead, and see both the pre-written endgame and the evolving execution, you've basically unlocked a masterclass. You can apply that lens to Robin's history, to Vegapunk, to the Void Century, to completely different series. You stop being a pattern-seeking monkey who sees Jesus in toast and start being a reader who can actually tell the difference between foreshadowing, retrofitting, and coincidence. And once you have that skill, Blackbeard stops being a blank box and turns into something way more interesting, a test case for an even earlier mystery power where Oda already ran this whole experiment, and then told us exactly what he did. The 3 categories: one last time, foreshadowing, retrofitting, pre-writing. So now that we've done the Stop Seeing Jesus in Toast bootcamp, we need to actually use the tools. I need you to stop for a second, clear out the fandom noise, and run Blackbeard through the 3 categories one last time: foreshadowing, retrofitting, pre-writing. Because when you do that, his secret stops being this mystical, unknowable thing and turns into a very specific writing strategy. First category, foreshadowing. Real foreshadowing is intentional and specific. The author already knows the payoff and is aiming at it. Marco saying Teach has an atypical body is not vague, spooky flavor text. That is Oda pointing a neon arrow at a concrete, pre-decided anomaly. The payoff is, this body breaks the normal devil fruit rule. The setup is, hey, remember his body is weird. That's Chekhov's gun. The gun is labeled. The target is chosen. The bullet is already engraved with 2 fruits, maybe 3. Second category, retrofitting. Here's the thing. This is not a sin. This is fine. This is normal. Retrofitting is when the author takes older, looser material and assigns it a sharper meaning once the plan hardens. Drum Island is the cleanest Blackbeard example. At first, that pirate who attacked Drum is just a scary off-screen threat to justify Waypole fleeing. Later, once Teach graduates from cool design in Jaya to pillar of the endgame, Oda goes back and says, actually, that was Blackbeard. Same event, new specificity. The original line didn't need a name. The retrofit gives it one. Third category, pre-writing. This is the big one. Pre-writing is when the author has already decided there's a Blackbeard mystery, already decided he's some kind of multi-soul, multi-something anomaly, but hasn't locked in every mechanic. So instead of clean foreshadowing, you get mystery seeds. Jaya is pure pre-writing. The plural they versus he speech, the food preference inversion with Luffy, the three skull flag, the people's dreams never end parallel monologue. These are clearly important, clearly intentional, but not yet pinned to a fully detailed PowerPoint about how his body works. Then you add the never sleeps line from his crew, the inconsistent teeth, the Cerberus-coded crew structure, and you can see the gradient. Early on, it's pre-writing. This guy is plural and wrong. Over time, as Oda's internal document on Teach crystallizes, those same ideas harden into foreshadowing. Marco's atypical body is pre-writing that's finished cooking. So through this lens, Blackbeard is not all foreshadowing or all retrofitting. He's a blend. The core concept, plurality, opposing Luffy's singular dream with fractured ambition, is pre-written. Specific payoffs, like the two devil fruits and the biological explanation, are foreshadowed. Peripheral details, like tying him to Drum, are retrofitted to strengthen the spine. And this is where I need you to upgrade how you argue about One Piece. Next time the community fights over a panel, don't flatten everything into perfect foreshadowing or plot hole. Ask, is this precise enough to be foreshadowing? Is this older and fuzzier, so it's probably retrofit? Or is this a pre-writing seed that hasn't paid off yet? Because once you start sorting Blackbeard that way, you're ready for the last step, using this triad to predict what Oda's already decided about the final war and the One Piece itself. So, how should we talk about Blackbeard from now on? So from this point on, we need to stop talking about Blackbeard in that vague, mystical, Oda foreshadowed everything way. It sounds flattering, sure, but it actually makes the achievement smaller. It turns 25 years of brutal, disciplined craft into a magic trick. Here's the thing. The more accurate, and honestly way more impressive sentence is this. Oda pre-wrote Blackbeard as a multi-soul anomaly, and then spent decades locking in the details. Not he just sprinkled hints everywhere. He decided up front that Teach is a biological and spiritual error in the One Piece world, and then he wrote forward and backward around that decision. So how do you talk about him now? You get specific. You stop posting a panel of Blackbeard's teeth and screaming foreshadowing the way a pattern-seeking monkey sees Jesus in toast. When someone drops a clue, you ask, which category is this? Is this hard foreshadowing? Is this pre-writing texture? Or is this a retrofit Oda glued on later? Take Marco's line about Teach's atypical body. That is foreshadowing in the strict sense, explicit, intentional, planned to support the two-fruit reveal, and whatever the final explanation is. It names the problem. It points to a future payoff. That's a very different category from the inconsistent teeth, which are probably stylistic pre-writing, a visual way for Oda to keep reminding himself, this guy's wrong, draw him wrong, long before he's ready to footnote it in story. And then you've got Drum Island. Blackbeard's off-screen attack on the country? That smells way more retrofit. Oda realizes later that he needs Teach connected to medical horror, to bodies, to experimentation. So he goes, cool, that's what happened back there. This is not a sin. This is fine. This is normal serialized storytelling. I need you to hear how that sounds in an actual comment, because this is the model. Instead of Oda is a god, you say, Marco's line is hard foreshadowing. The teeth are probably just stylistic pre-writing, and Drum Island is a clean retrofit. That's it. That's nuanced, but It's not homework. Any fan in the community can do that. And suddenly, half the pointless debates vanish. You're no longer arguing about whether the author is omniscient or whether every Sake Cup and Jolly Roger skull was planned in 1997. You're arguing about what's on the page, what was clearly intentional, and where Oda is cleverly reusing his own mess. That's where the real fun is. Listen to me. Being precise is not about being joyless. You're not turning One Piece into a lab report. You're just refusing to turn your brain off. You're respecting the story, and you're respecting your own intelligence as a reader. Pattern interrupt. What happens when we apply this to the final war and the One Piece itself? If we sort those clues the same way, a very specific future starts to appear, and it's not the one most theory thumbnails are selling you. Your turn. Prove me wrong, or help finish the puzzle. So here's the thing. Once you sort Blackbeard with that same lab report brain, you kind of can't go back. You can't unsee it. What we just did is treat him the way we treated Laughtail in the final war. As a pre-written endpoint, Oda has been carefully orbiting for decades, not a chaos gremlin he's winging month to month. Restate it with me so it's burned in. Teach is not a walking plot hole. He is a multi-soul, multi-fruit body tied to the D, built as Luffy's dark mirror and Joy Boy's corrupted cousin. That's the thesis. Not vibes, not wouldn't it be cool if, but a model that actually eats the evidence and doesn't choke. We went from Jaya's bar, where they love different pies and dreams never end, to Marineford's tarp and that disgusting off-screen fruit surgery. We pulled in Marco straight up saying atypical body, so we're not hand-waving it as plot armor. We stared at that 3-skull flag. We talked about never sleeps. We even got weird about his teeth. You didn't just hoard trivia. You built a coherent category of clues and asked, what kind of author does this on accident? Now, listen to me. This is the part where I hand you the knife. If you hate this theory, I need you to actually hate it correctly. Don't just go, nah, Cerberus dumb. That's not a counter-argument. That's a YouTube comment with extra steps. If you disagree, present a full alternative explanation that fits every single piece of foreshadowing we walked through. Jaya pronouns, food inversion, never sleeping, Marco's line, the tarp, the 3 skulls, the teeth, the D parallels, all of it. We need to turn the comments into a serious theory lab, not a meme swamp where someone posts Blackbeard is 3 raccoons in a trench coat and gets 5,000 likes. This is not a sin. Being wrong on the internet is not a war crime. This is fine. This is normal. I am a pattern-seeking monkey who sees Jesus in toast. You are too. You just have better self-control. So channel that. In the comments, tell me your favorite Blackbeard scene. The one panel or line that finally tipped you over into, okay, Oda planned this territory. Or the one that still makes you go, nope, you're coping. And then, tell me which other One Piece mystery you want put through this same meat grinder. The Gorosei, Emu, Zoro's lineage. We can lab report all of it. Thank you for surviving a 2-hour rant about a man with bad teeth and worse morals. When Oda finally writes the SBS that spells this out in crayon, we will be there together, on stream, either fully vindicated or publicly eating crow. And if it's crow, I'll season it. Don't worry.